A grandma was selling candy on the street to buy a dress for her granddaughter, and the girl's mother, upon seeing the gift, tossed it in the trash without batting an eye. What no one expected is what the girl did next. A true story that's going to hurt you, but also move you to tears. The first time Mrs. Grace saw the dress, she knew it was the one. It was hanging in the window of a simple shop in downtown Philadelphia, nestled between school uniforms and clearance blouses. It was light blue, with white flowers embroidered on the hem and a small bow at the waist. It cost the same as a week of her complete sales. But she didn't hesitate for a second. That dress wasn't just clothing, it was her way of telling her granddaughter, "I see you, I love you, and you deserve something nice." But what Grace never imagined was that, upon giving that gift with all her heart, the girl's mother, her own daughter-in-law, would call it alleyway rags and throw it directly into the garbage can in front of everyone. And it was that scene, that act, that woke something up in little Lucy, something that even Sarah herself could never stop. If this story has already touched you, even a little bit, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, so you don't miss the next parts of this story that, believe me, is only just beginning. Give it a like if you also believe that some gifts are priceless. And write the word grandma in the comments so the world knows that love still exists. That very day, hours before everything happened, Mrs. Grace had gone out with the first ray of sun. She tied her scarf around her neck, put on her worn-out sneakers, and took the basket where she carried her homemade candies, peanut brittle, caramel, and taffy. "I'll make enough today," she said to herself, as she walked toward South Street, where the traffic light across from the gas station gave her 3 minutes to offer her candies to drivers. No one was waiting for her. No one was protecting her. But she was determined. At 72 years old, Grace wasn't selling to survive. She was selling for love. For that 6-year-old girl sleeping in the back room. The only person in the world who still hugged her tightly. Lucy. A girl with round cheeks, with a shy laugh and a look that said more than she could explain. Her mother, Sarah, was another story. Cold, hard, always in a rush, always annoyed. "Don't you dare interfere with my daughter, you hear me? You did enough raising your son the way you did," Sarah once told Grace, with venom in her voice. And although Grace never defended herself, that comment hurt her more than a punch. Because that son, Robert, was no longer there. He had died 2 years earlier, in a motorcycle accident, leaving a hole in his mother's heart and a daughter without a dad. Since then, Sarah let Grace live in a makeshift room in the backyard. Not out of kindness, but out of necessity. One more mouth to wash the clothes, sweep the entrance, and watch the girl when she wasn't around. Grace accepted, not for comfort, but for a very simple reason. She couldn't stay away from Lucy. And it was for her, for that girl who once told her in the softest voice, "Grandma, do you think I can go to school one day in a new dress, like the other girls have?" That Grace decided. She was going to save dollar by dollar until she could buy that dress. It didn't matter how much her back ached. It didn't matter that people ignored her on the street. She would do it, even if no one else would do it for her. That morning was different. A serious-looking young man approached her basket and bought 3 pieces of candy, but instead of taking them, he left a folded bill and said, "This isn't for the candy, it's for your granddaughter." Grace wanted to reply, but couldn't. She just squeezed that bill between her hands, her eyes filled with tears, because with that gesture, she finally had enough to buy the dress. What she didn't know yet was that that very night, her heart was going to break again. When Mrs. Grace got home that night, she carried something more valuable than money in her cloth bag. The dress. Blue, with hand-embroidered daisies and a small white bow in front. The shop wrapped it in crisp cellophane paper and tied it with a simple ribbon that she didn't want to remove, not even to check it. She slipped through the patio door without a sound. The hallway light bulb flickered, as if it felt cold too. She left her candy basket on a bench, took a deep breath, and took out the dress with both hands, like someone carrying a miracle. Lucy was already asleep. She went up the stairs slowly, with the dress against her chest, and carefully pushed open the ajar door of the room. The girl was lying on her side, with an old teddy bear blanket and her rag doll under her arm. Grace left the folded dress on the chair beside the bed. She didn't want to wake her. She just placed a handwritten note in shaky script. "For my Lucy, with love from your grandma." Then she went downstairs without a sound, closing the door behind her with a tenderness that isn't heard, but is felt. She slept little that night. She woke up often, thinking about the face her granddaughter would make when she saw the dress at sunrise. That hope had kept her alive for weeks, and in that moment, it seemed enough to keep going for an entire year. But in the house upstairs, there was another woman who didn't share that tenderness. Sarah was already awake. She had been checking her cell phone since early morning, drinking coffee from a giant mug and muttering things under her breath. The street noise came through the windows, but she seemed more preoccupied with what was happening inside her house. When she entered her daughter's room to dress her, it didn't take long for her to see the blue dress. She picked it up from the chair with 2 fingers, as if it were used clothing from the trash. "And what the heck is this?" Lucy, still with her eyes swollen from sleep, sat up. It's a gift from my grandma." Sarah raised an eyebrow, turned the dress over, and looked at it up and down. "This was brought to you by that woman. For what? So you can make a fool of yourself wearing this?" Lucy didn't say anything. She just looked down. Sarah walked to the kitchen with the dress in her hand. She opened the garbage can and tossed it inside without thinking. "This is not clothing for a decent girl. It's alleyway rags." Grace, who was sweeping the patio, heard the sound of the bin closing. She peeked with her heart pounding. And there, in the corner of the black bag, she saw the tip of the blue dress. She didn't say anything. She just pressed her lips together and kept sweeping. Sarah returned to her daughter's room with an old t-shirt in her hand. "Put this on. Don't start with your nonsense." Lucy, silent, obeyed. But when her mother left the room, her eyes welled up with tears. She peeked out the window. Her grandmother was still sweeping, pretending nothing was happening. In the kitchen, Sarah didn't stop grumbling, always sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. As if it wasn't enough that I'm supporting her, now she wants to play mother. At noon, Grace went to the farmer's market to buy beans and bread. She walked slower than usual and didn't talk to anyone. When she returned, the garbage can was no longer in its place. The garbage truck had passed recently, but something seemed strange to her. The lid was open, and bags were missing. She didn't ask. She just looked towards the stairs. That night, Lucy didn't have dinner with her mother. She said she had a headache. Sarah, as always, didn't insist. Instead, when the house fell silent, the girl went down the stairs in socks, carrying a plastic bag in her hand. She gently knocked on the door of the little house in the back. "Grandma, can I come in?" Grace opened without asking. Lucy came in and carefully took out the blue dress. It had sauce and coffee stains, a loose thread on the sleeve, but it was still whole. "I took it out before they hauled it away. I didn't want it to leave. It's the nicest thing I have." Grace hugged her so tightly that the girl was breathless for a moment. Then, in silence, they sat together to wash it in a bucket, with warm water and pink soap. They gently scrubbed, one sleeve first, then the skirt. They changed the water twice. When they finished, they hung it on a line behind the little house, under the light of a weak bulb. They both looked at it for a long time, swinging in the breeze, as if it were a treasure floating among the stars. "Thank you, Grandma," Lucy whispered. Grace didn't answer. She just stroked her hair and covered her with a blanket while the girl lay down on her spare bed. That was the first night they slept together, and also the first that Sarah came down to the patio in silence, looking for her daughter. When she saw the light on in the little house, she clenched her fists. She went close to the door, but didn't knock. She stayed for a moment, listening from outside. Inside there were no voices, just the soft sound of a girl's calm breathing and the slight sway of a dress that kept dripping under the moon. Sarah left without saying anything. But the next day, something in her face would have changed, and it wouldn't be for the better. The first lights of the morning barely touched the patio walls when Mrs. Grace opened her eyes. Lucy was sleeping in her makeshift bed, her face buried in the blankets and her hair messy on the pillow. The blue dress hung in silence behind the house, still damp, still a miracle. Grace sat up without a sound, tucked the girl in a little more, and carefully went out to make coffee. The aroma of cinnamon filled the little house. Everything seemed peaceful, but inside her, an uneasiness began to grow. It wasn't anger. It was something colder, deeper, a quiet certainty that Sarah wouldn't tolerate seeing them so close. And she was right. Sarah came down to the patio an hour later, with dry footsteps, without saying hello. She only shot a quick glance at the clothesline where the dress was hanging. She recognized it. She didn't say anything, but her frown was deeper than normal. She went into the main kitchen without opening her mouth. Lucy woke up shortly after. She came down barefoot, still sleepy, but with a gentle smile. She sat down at the table and looked at her grandmother as if she didn't need to say anything. Between them, words weren't always necessary. They understood each other with looks, with gestures, with silences. They had dry bread with butter and some beans for breakfast. For them, it was enough. Later, Grace walked Lucy to the gate that separated the main house. "Your mom can't know you slept here, okay?" Lucy nodded. "I won't say anything. And if she asks about the dress? I'll say I couldn't find it." Grace stayed for a moment watching the girl go up the stairs and enter the world where she wasn't welcome again. Then she returned to her little room and sat by the window, looking at the sky without seeing it. While sewing a loose button on an old blouse, her mind took her back years. She remembered the day Robert, her only son, introduced her to Sarah for the first time. She was a young woman, beautiful, but with a look that didn't convince her. It wasn't distrust, it was distance. Cold, ambitious, with measured words. She never liked how she looked at him, or how she talked about her family. "She's very different from us, son," she had told him privately. "That's why I like her, Mum, because she has goals." Then came the marriage, rushed. At first, Sarah feigned friendliness. She visited Grace with a bag of donuts. She smiled. But after Lucy's birth, everything changed. Distance, criticism, reproach. When Robert died, hit by a truck on the highway, Sarah was left with everything: the house, the car, the girl. And Grace was left only with her memories, and with the silent promise of never leaving her granddaughter. The day of the funeral, while she was still crying next to the coffin, Sarah told her bluntly, "I have no one else to help me with the girl. If you want to stay, there's a free room in the patio, but don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong." And so it was. Grace accepted that corner with bitter gratitude, because more than a physical space, it was a way to stay close to the only thing she had left in the world. Since then, she lived in the shadows. She cooked when she could, she swept, she washed clothes, she helped Lucy with her homework, but always from a distance, because Sarah never allowed her to take the place of a mother or a grandmother, only that of a silent servant. But now, with the dress rescued, with the girl looking for her at night, something inside Grace began to stir. It wasn't rebellion, it was determination. That afternoon, she took an old notebook from the drawer. In its pages, there were lists of expenses, recipes, prayers, copied by hand. She flipped through several pages until she found a blank space. She took a bitten pencil and wrote in small letters, "Save every dime. Don't touch anything. Save up for what's coming." It was her way of planning in silence, her way of preparing herself, because something told her that this wouldn't end like this, and that the girl, sooner or later, would need more than a dress. When night fell, Lucy came down again. This time she had a folded sheet of paper in her pocket. It was a drawing. In it, two figures appeared holding hands, a girl in a blue dress and an older woman with grey braids. Both were smiling in front of a little house with flowers on the door. "Is that me?" Grace asked. "It's you and it's me," the girl replied. "And it's our house." Grace couldn't hold back her tears. "But we live here, my love." "No. This house is the one we're going to have someday. Just you and me." Grace hugged her so tightly she felt a knot in her chest. The girl didn't know everything her mother was capable of. She didn't know what her father had suffered. She didn't know that there were things that had been kept silent for too long. But Grace knew it. And for the first time in years, she knew that she couldn't keep quiet forever. That same night, while the girl slept beside her, she got up, opened her old wooden trunk, and began to search among the yellowing papers. She was looking for something. A letter, a document, a written memory, something she had hidden and that she wasn't sure she wanted to read again. But it was no longer time for fear, because what was coming couldn't be faced with silence. And that letter was still there, folded between two tablecloths, exactly where she had left it, years ago. Grace took it out. Her hands were shaking. Her heart, too. The paper was wrinkled, but intact, and the name written outside still hurt like the first day. "For my mum, if something happens to me." Mrs. Grace sat down with the letter in her lap, and without knowing it, she had just opened the door to a past that Sarah had sworn to bury forever. Grace spent the rest of that night sitting in her old wicker chair with the letter in her hands. She didn't dare open it yet. The mere fact of seeing it, of feeling the weight of the sealed envelope on her fingers, turned her stomach as if the past were about to come through the door. But it wasn't time for memories. It was time to do what she had always done, resist in silence. At dawn, before the sun touched the hills on the outskirts of Philadelphia, Grace went out to the patio, washed her face with cold water in the sink, changed her faded blouse for another equally old but less torn one, and picked up her basket. Inside, taffy and coconut candies that she had prepared the afternoon before with the last of her sugar and molasses. She crossed the dirt street, walked 7 blocks until she reached the avenue. There, between the noise of the trucks and the smell of gasoline, she placed her body in front of the traffic light that divided South Street with the extension of West 2 Street. It was a strategic point. The cars stopped for almost 2 minutes, just enough time to approach and offer her candies to the drivers. "Get your candy, homemade with love," she said in her soft voice, looking hopefully at those who rolled down their windows. Some ignored her completely, others smiled but kept going. Sometimes the youngest ones played cruel jokes on her. Once they told her she should sell tissues instead, to cry over her old age. That morning, however, a man in a suit bought 2 candies and gave her a bill she wasn't expecting. "Keep it, Grandma. You remind me of mine." It wasn't much, but for Grace it meant taking another step forward. Around 10 o'clock, she sat on the curb and took out a small bag with dry bread. She accompanied it with a drink of water from an old bottle. When she finished, she stood up again, straightened her back as best she could, and returned to walking among the cars. Behind her, the city continued. People in a rush, office workers, students, mothers with grocery bags. No one knew who she was. No one asked why she was there. Only Lucy. Thinking about the girl gave her strength. Thinking about the way she hugged the blue dress while sleeping kept her on her feet. That dress wasn't just a gift. It was a promise. And even though Sarah had thrown it in the trash can, Lucy had rescued it. That changed everything. That night, upon returning home, Grace found a bag of rice and a small note next to the door of her little house. Someone in the neighborhood had left it there. "You are not alone," the paper said. She felt a lump in her throat. She picked up the bag, put it away, and that same night prepared rice pudding. When Lucy sneaked down, after Sarah had fallen asleep, they shared it sitting on the floor, laughing quietly so as not to wake anyone up. "Grandma, were you always poor?" The question took her by surprise. "Why do you ask?" "Because in the stories, the poor grandmas always end up being rich, or someone rescues them, or they become magical." Grace smiled, stroking her hair. "I am already rich, my love. I have the best granddaughter in the world." Lucy smiled back, but her eyes said something else. There was something in that girl that was becoming an adult before her time. A sad, silent glow, as if she understood more than she should. The next day, Grace returned to the traffic light, but this time it was different. A young man distributing flyers on the corner offered her an old stool. She accepted it gratefully. Sitting for 5 minutes between rounds of cars saved her spine. "Do you come every day?" the young man asked her. "Whenever I can. And what are you saving up for?" Grace hesitated for a second. "For my granddaughter." He didn't say anything else, but later he brought her a bottle of water and a couple of tortillas wrapped in paper. Gestures like that kept her going. They reminded her that there was still kindness in the world. Upon returning home that afternoon, she took out her old notebook and wrote down the amount she had collected that day. It wasn't much, but little by little, the coins began to fill the glass jar hidden behind the rags. Before sleeping, she sat on her bed with the letter she had found days earlier. This time, she opened it. The envelope crackled as if waking up after years of sleep. The handwriting was Robert's, firm but hurried. "Mum, if you're reading this, it's because something happened to me. I don't want you to think it was an accident. Sarah and I have been arguing a lot. She doesn't want Lucy to see you. She says you confuse her, that you put ideas in her head, but you know that's not true." Grace dropped the paper. She left it on her lap. "No, it can't be." Robert's voice was still there, between those lines. And the fear he felt, she now understood. The door to the past, once again, was opening without permission, and what would come out of it could no longer be stopped. The sound of the paper tearing filled the little room. Mrs. Grace had finished reading the entire letter. She closed her eyes for a moment and felt her chest tighten with a bitter mix of sadness, powerlessness, and something harder to name, an old fury which had remained dormant for years. But it wasn't time to break down. That letter would be well kept, for now. In its place, there was something urgent she still had to fulfill, a purpose that had been born in the midst of contempt and silence, to put a clean, beautiful dress on her granddaughter's shoulders. That same morning, before dawn, Grace took her jar of coins. She emptied it onto the bed. She separated every coin, every dime, nickel, and quarter. She smoothed them onto the sheet with the same care a mother arranges her child's clothes before the first day of school. The total was just right, $57.50. And it was enough. She placed the money in a small cloth bag, hid it in her blouse, tied her scarf tightly, and left the house before Sarah woke up. She walked decisively toward downtown Philadelphia. The streets were still damp from the morning dew. As she passed, the first municipal market stalls were being set up, and the smell of freshly baked bread enveloped her. She passed butcher shops, bakeries, and shoe stores until she reached the shop she had seen weeks ago, a simple clothing store with a hand-painted sign that read "Girls Specials from $49. The dress was still there, in the window. Sky blue, with small embroidered daisies on the hem, a white bow in the center, and short lace sleeves. She entered the premises, and an older woman, with a kind face and red-dyed hair, approached her. "Can I help you, dear?" Grace pointed with a trembling finger. "I want that dress. It's for my granddaughter." The woman took it down from the mannequin and shook it carefully. "It's on sale. I only have 2 pieces left. Do you know what size you need?" Grace nodded confidently. 6. She's small, but it fits her. While the lady wrapped the dress in cellophane paper and tied it with a ribbon, Grace took out the little bag and counted one by one the coins on the counter. "I'm 50 cents short, but if you want I can bring you a lollipop tomorrow," she joked with a shy smile. The saleswoman let out a gentle chuckle. "Don't worry. Take it. Your granddaughter is going to look beautiful." Grace took the package with both hands. It wasn't just clothing. It was something more. It was dignity. It was tenderness. It was a way of saying, "I love you," without words. Before leaving, she took a folded paper from her purse. She had written it the night before, after reading her son's letter. On it, it said, "For my Lucy, may this dress always remind you that you are valuable, that you deserve good things, and that no matter what, your grandma will always be with you." She signed with blue ink, "Grace." She put the note inside the package, between the paper and the dress, and left the store walking with a light heart for the first time in a long time. Upon arriving home, the sun was already bathing the tin roofs. Sarah still hadn't left the room, and Lucy was playing sitting on the doorstep of the entrance, drawing on a recycled sheet with broken pencils. "Come here, my love. I want to give you something." The girl ran to the gate. Grace carefully took out the package and handed it to her underneath. "Don't open it now. Hide it, okay? Take it to your room and open it when no one sees you." Lucy received it as if she were being given a star. She hid it under her shirt and ran up the stairs without saying a word. Her little eyes were shining. Grace watched her disappear and then returned to her little house with a smile that crossed her entire face. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She went to bed early, but every time she closed her eyes, she imagined Lucy's little face opening the gift. She wondered if she would like the color, if she would try on the dress in front of the mirror, if she would feel pretty. She allowed herself to dream of something good for once. The next day, everything changed. From the window of her little house, Grace heard Sarah's footsteps on the upper floor. Quick, heavy, then a door slam. Afterward, silence. And finally, Sarah's voice resonated like a sharp knife. "What is this, Lucy?" Who gave you this?" The girl's answer was a whisper. Grace couldn't quite hear it, but she did hear the dull thud of the package against the floor, the rustle of the cellophane, and then the sound of the black garbage bag being opened. Grace went out. The blood was buzzing in her ears. From the staircase, she saw Sarah in the kitchen, with the wrinkled dress in one hand. "You are not going to wear this, you hear me? This trash looks like it came out of a dump." And without another word, she threw it into the can along with the food scraps. Lucy, standing nearby, wasn't crying. She was just watching, with a contained rage that was not common for a girl. Grace stood there, paralyzed. She didn't say anything. She just clung to the doorframe, because she felt her legs were no longer responding. But as the dress fell over the remains of tortilla and tomato peels, something else fell inside Grace's heart. The absolute certainty that Sarah had crossed a line. And what Grace would do next wouldn't be to keep silent. The afternoon wore on without haste, but with an invisible weight that seeped through the cracks of the soul. The patio was silent. The neighbors' chickens clucked in the distance, and somewhere an old radio played country songs that no one was really listening to. Mrs. Grace hadn't left her little house since the morning episode, not because she was tired, but because something inside her had broken, and she didn't know how to stand up the same way as before. She had witnessed many humiliations in her life: poverty, abandonment, the indifference of institutions, the contempt of some distant relatives after her husband's death. But that scene, seeing her gift, that clean, embroidered dress, bought with so much effort, being thrown into the trash as if it were garbage, that was different. And not because of the dress, but because of what it symbolized. Because that gift carried within it everything she could no longer say with words. And the worst hadn't been seeing it fall among the waste. The worst was looking at Lucy. Her face showed no tears. She didn't throw a tantrum. She just remained silent, as if she had understood something that a child shouldn't understand, as if something inside her had also broken. Hours later, the house was still silent. Sarah, as if nothing had happened, left for work. Lucy locked herself in her room. Grace, for her part, remained sitting by the window, her hands clasped in her lap, watching the clouds pass as someone who waits for an answer from the sky. At nightfall, the girl's small footsteps were heard on the stairs. She came down slowly, with the care of someone who doesn't want to be heard. She carried an unlit flashlight in her hand and a cloth bag hidden under her sweater. She gently knocked on the door of the little house. Grace opened without surprise, as if she already knew her granddaughter would come. Lucy entered without speaking. She hugged her grandmother tightly, very tightly. And then, without saying anything, she took the blue dress out of the bag. It was stained, wrinkled, it smelled of old food and sour coffee, but it was whole. "I took it out before the garbage truck passed," she said in a low voice. "I hid when Mum left. I was scared. But I wasn't going to let her throw away your love." Grace looked at her for a long time. She didn't say anything. She just knelt down next to the wash basin, turned on the cold water faucet, and began to fill a bucket. Lucy understood immediately. The two of them set to work, side by side, as if washing that dress were the most sacred thing they would do in their lives. They scrubbed every corner with soda soap. They removed the stains with lemon and salt. They rinsed it 1, 2, 3 times. Then they hung it on the clothesline under the light bulb in the backyard, which barely flickered. The dress dripped, held by 2 rusty clothespins, like a symbol of resistance. "We're going to keep it, Grandma," Lucy said as she dried her hands. "No one else will touch it. No one." Grace nodded. That night, She wrote again in her notebook. Lucy saved it. She rescued it. She doesn't forget. She doesn't let them trample on what is made with love. She is not like her mother. She didn't finish the sentence. The tears had come first. Lucy slept with her grandmother that night. She curled up under the thin blankets, and for the first time in many days, she fell asleep without fear. But Sarah didn't take long to notice. The next morning, she went up to her daughter's room to wake her up, but the bed was empty. She checked the bathroom, the kitchen, the living room. Nothing. Finally, she went down to the patio. She knocked on the door of the little house with hard knuckles. "Lucy, are you there?" Grace opened with the same serenity with which she did everything. "Yes, she is here. She fell asleep with me. It rained last night. She was scared." Sarah entered as if it were her own house, with sure footsteps and a tight jaw. She looked at her daughter as if her soul had left her. "Do you think this is normal? Sleeping here as if you were a tramp?" Lucy lowered her head. Grace wanted to respond, but restrained herself. She knew that if she spoke, she would only make things worse. Sarah turned with a coldness that hurt in the air. "Enough of this ridiculousness. If you come down again without permission, you'll see what happens to you. And you, Grace, enough is enough. Don't put ideas in the girl's head. She is not your daughter." The phrase fell like a stone. She is not your daughter. Grace carefully closed the door when Sarah left, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Lucy was shaking, and not from cold. "I don't care," the girl said, her eyes full of contained rage. "I know she doesn't like me, but you love me. And that's enough for me." Grace stroked her hair, trying to contain the lump in her throat. That afternoon, they took the now dry dress upstairs, folded it carefully, wrapped it in a clean bag, and hid it among the blankets on Grace's bed. The girl didn't want it to go back to her room. "We'll keep it here instead. It's safe here." And Grace didn't argue. She just hugged her tighter. But that night, while Lucy slept and the house held its false silence, Grace took out her son's letter again. She read it again, slowly, as if every word was an echo becoming clearer, and then she understood. Robert hadn't pulled away because of his work, or because of stress, or because of pride. Robert had kept quiet out of fear, and now Grace knew exactly what she had to do. But she wasn't going to rush, because the truth, when it's revealed, has to hurt enough so that they can't bury it again. That night, while the lights of Philadelphia flickered in the distance like impatient stars, Lucy didn't sleep. She stayed awake next to her grandmother, her eyes wide open looking at the low ceiling of the little house. She stroked the edge of the blanket while her thoughts spun, without stopping. She didn't understand why her mother treated her like that. She didn't understand how someone could despise something so beautiful. But above all, she didn't understand why the affection her grandmother gave her seemed to bother her so much. Because that's what she felt when she was there. Affection, without shouts, without orders, without senseless punishment. When she heard the last door slam from the upstairs and the lights went out completely, she knew the time had come. She got up slowly without making a sound and headed for the corner where they had hidden the blue dress. She carefully took it out. It was clean, dry, and still smelled of soap. She spread it out on the bed and examined it carefully. In the dim light of the bulb hanging from the ceiling, the embroidered daisies seemed to shine by themselves. "No one will ever throw you away again," she whispered. "No one." She folded it precisely, as if it were something fragile. Then she looked for a cardboard box that her grandmother kept under the bed, where she previously had threads and buttons. She emptied the contents and placed the dress inside. Then, she covered it with her grandmother's scarf, the softest one, the one she wore to church when it was cold. She closed it, without saying a word, and slid the box under her bed, against the wall. Mrs. Grace had been watching her from the other side of the room. She hadn't said anything. She didn't need to. She knew her granddaughter was doing more than just storing clothes. She was making a decision. Lucy sat down next to her. She cuddled into her arms and said, "I'm going to take care of it as if it were a treasure, because it is." Grace hugged her tightly. She kissed her forehead and murmured, "You are my treasure, Lucy. Nothing is worth more than you." The next day, Sarah came down to the patio with heavy footsteps. She had noticed that the girl was becoming quieter, firmer, more like her grandmother, and that irritated her. She couldn't stand the idea of losing control. The girl was hers. She was her daughter, not that old woman who lived in the back like a parasite. "Where are you, Lucy?" she shouted from the hallway. The girl, who was inside the little house helping Grace sweep, dropped the broom and went out immediately. "I'm here, Mum." "You're here again? Didn't I tell you I don't want you coming down without permission?" "I was just helping Grandma. That's all." Sarah came down the steps and stood in front of her with her arms crossed. "Since when do you disobey me? Do you think you can do whatever you want now?" "It's not that," Lucy replied, looking down. Sarah grabbed her arm forcefully and pulled her upstairs. "Let's go. And you, Grace, I don't want to see the girl coming in here again. Understand? This is not your house." Grace didn't respond, but in her eyes there was a firmness that hadn't been there before, one that was born from pain, yes, but also from something stronger, dignity. That afternoon, Lucy didn't want to come down. She didn't talk during dinner either. She just ate in silence and locked herself in her room. Later that night, she came down again. She brought the dress box in her arms. She knocked on the door, and when her grandmother opened, she told her something Grace didn't expect. "I'm going to hide it where Mom will never find it, because this dress is like you, and I don't want anyone to soil it again." Grace looked at her in silence, with a lump in her throat. The girl was talking like an adult, as if her soul had suddenly stretched. Lucy entered, left the box hidden in the darkest corner of the closet, and sat down at the table. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, my love. Did my dad love you?" Grace looked at her, surprised. "Very much." "Your dad was a good son. And my mum, too? I don't know. In her own way, maybe. And what do you think of her?" Grace hesitated. She didn't want to speak ill of Sarah in front of her granddaughter, but she couldn't lie either. "I think your mom is hurt. And sometimes, when people have wounds that don't heal, they become hard. Like stone. And am I going to become like that too?" "No, Lucy," Grace said, taking her hands, "because you have something she didn't have. You have love, and that changes everything." Lucy hugged her, leaned on her legs, and fell asleep there, like when she was younger and still didn't understand what rejection was. Grace watched her sleep for a while. Afterward, she got up, went to her trunk, took out Robert's letter, and read it again. Something inside her told her that letter would soon have to see the light. But not yet. First, she needed to protect her granddaughter. And the next day, that need would become an urgency, because something, or someone, would come to stir up the past. And this time, it wouldn't be about words, but about evidence. The next morning dawned grey. A thick air ran through the neighborhood streets, and the sky threatened rain before sunrise. Mrs. Grace woke up early, as always. She sat on the edge of her wooden bed, slowly stretched her arms, and looked toward the corner where Lucy slept, still curled up under the blankets, breathing peacefully. She didn't wake her. She turned down the volume on the portable radio she used as an alarm clock, heated coffee on her old coal stove, and cut a piece of stale bread. While having breakfast in silence, she thought about what Robert had written in that letter. Sometimes the handwriting appeared in her mind as if she had memorized it. She couldn't shake it off. When Lucy woke up, she seemed more determined than usual. She washed her face, combed her hair herself, without her grandmother saying a single word, and went straight to the box where they had hidden the dress. She took it out. She held it in her hands as if it were something sacred. "Aren't you going to sell candy today?" she asked, while arranging the piece of clothing on the bed. "Yes, later." "Why?" "Because I want you to help me iron it. I want to make it perfect." "For when I need it?" Grace looked at her, not understanding. "And when do you need it?" "For the school presentation day." Mrs. Grace felt a pang in her chest. She remembered that date very well. It was in 2 weeks. An event held every year in the elementary school auditorium, where all the girls danced in pretty dresses, where all the mothers applauded loudly, and where generally Sarah didn't even show up. "Are you sure you're going to wear it? Will your mum let you?" "She won't know," Lucy replied without hesitation. "I'll put it on here, with you, and then I'll go straight to school." Grace didn't know whether to worry or be proud, but she nodded. Sometimes, silence is also a form of support. They looked for the charcoal iron they had stored for years. It wasn't modern, but it worked. Grace put the pot of water on to heat up, to dampen a cloth, and together they began to iron the dress patiently. There was no hurry. They carefully ran the iron over the fabric, as if they were repairing the wounds that Sarah's hands had left. "You know what I think?" Lucy said, as she ran her fingers over the lace on the sleeve. "What?" "That this dress is like you." "Like me?" "Yes. People look at it and don't think it's worth anything. But when they get to know it, when they see how it was made and how much love it has, they don't want to let go." Grace smiled. She didn't say anything else. Sometimes, a child's words say more than a lifetime of sermons. Once finished, they folded it carefully and put it back in the box. Lucy looked at it before closing it. "Today we're going to hide it really well." She climbed onto a small shelf hidden behind the wardrobe. It was a place where no one had put their hand for years. There, between a box of old threads and a dusty blanket, she placed it. "Done. No one touches it." Grace noticed that her granddaughter's voice sounded different. It no longer had that tremble of a child who fears being discovered. It sounded firm, and that firmness scared her, because it didn't belong to a 6-year-old girl. That afternoon, as always, Grace went out with her basket. The sky had cleared up a bit. She walked to the usual corner, near the traffic light where she sold. She didn't sell much, but she returned with enough coins to buy some rice and some tortillas. When she came back, it was already dark. Lucy was waiting for her, sitting at the entrance of the little house. She had her legs crossed and a folded piece of paper in her hands. "I made a drawing. Do you want to see it?" Grace took it. In it there were 2 figures, an older woman, with white braids, a long dress, and a huge smile, and a girl with a bow and a blue dress, standing next to her, in front of a house with flowers on the door. "That's us," Lucy said, pointing. "But we're not here. We're in our house, one where no one yells at us." Grace felt something inside her break in silence. She put the drawing away between the pages of her notebook as if it were a will. "We're going to keep this memory, for when we need it." That night they had rice and eggs for dinner. They shared a cup of warm hot chocolate, and then Lucy fell asleep on her grandmother's lap. But not everything was calm. Upstairs, Sarah was on the phone, a conversation that would change the routine in the following days. Yes, good evening. Are you Lucy's teacher? Ah, of course. What did you say? You want her to participate in the school event? Hmm, well, I don't know if she can. I'd have to think about it. The girl has been distracted lately. Silence. Then Sarah added, she's very attached to her grandmother, and that's not good for her. That woman spoils her. The conversation lasted barely 5 minutes, but it was enough, because the next day, the teacher would knock on the door of the house, not to talk about grades, but to ask a question that would change everything. Monday dawned differently, not because of the weather. It was still cloudy like the previous days, but because of the way Lucy came down the stairs that morning. She no longer did it running, or with fear, or looking over her shoulder to see if her mother was following her. She did it with a firm step, calm, like someone who no longer has to ask permission to feel love, Mrs. Grace was sitting outside the little house, shelling peas with a cloth over her legs. When she saw the girl approaching, she smiled without saying a word. Lucy sat down next to her and began to help her without being asked. And that was the first day of the new ritual. Every day, after breakfast, Lucy went down to the patio with any excuse. Sometimes she said she was going for her sweater. Other times, that she had forgotten her notebook. Sometimes she didn't even say anything. She simply appeared and sat with her grandmother. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. But the silence between them wasn't awkward. It was warm, like the kind of silence that only exists between two people who understand each other without the need for explanations. Grace, who for years had learned to move without making a sound so as not to bother anyone, now found herself waiting for those tiny footsteps every morning. She would prepare a little bread with caramel or a cup of warm hot chocolate. She had a blanket folded for her in case it was cold. Lucy, for her part, began to change too. She no longer complained as much at school. She no longer came back with a frown. Even her teachers noticed that she spoke more, that she raised her hand, that she laughed. What Sarah didn't know or didn't want to see was that the girl was blossoming, and the water that made her grow wasn't coming from her house, but from the corner she had always despised, the little house in the back. One afternoon, while they were playing at waxing Grace's old shoes, the girl asked, "Grandma, what would you do if someone was hiding things from you?" "Like what things?" "Things you should know. That would change your life if you knew them." Grace left the cloth on the table. She understood immediately that this question wasn't part of the game. "Sometimes the truth takes a long time to arrive, my love," she replied in a low voice. "But when it does arrive, you can no longer close your eyes again. And does it hurt? A lot. But it also frees you." Lucy didn't say anything else that day, but since then, whenever she could, she would open the box with the hidden dress and look at it. She didn't try it on. She just touched it with her fingertips. As if in that way, she could absorb the strength her grandmother had put into every stitch, every coin saved, every sacrifice. A day before the school event, Grace decided to do something special. She went to the market and, with a few coins left over from her sales, bought a small cloth flower, one of those sold to decorate headbands. It was white, small, with a yellow center. Upon returning, she sewed it by hand onto the top of the blue dress, right on the chest. When Lucy saw it, she couldn't hold back her tears. "Now it looks new." "It is new," Grace corrected, "because now it has a story." and what has a story is worth double. That night, while the city slept, Lucy stayed in the little house as she had been doing in recent days. She no longer asked permission. She no longer hid it. It was her space, her refuge. Upstairs, Sarah was beginning to notice the change, but she didn't know how to stop it. She had tried punishing her. She had tried ignoring her. She had even threatened to take her to live with an aunt in Chicago, but none of that worked. Lucy didn't respond with tantrums. She responded with silence, with presence, with a calm that disarmed any shouting, and that, more than anything else, irritated her. One afternoon, Lucy's teacher, a woman in her late 50s, with white hair pulled back in a bun and a soft but firm voice, came to the house. She knocked on the door politely. Grace was the one who opened. Sarah wasn't there. "Good afternoon. Is Lucy's mum home?" "No. She left a while ago. Can I help you with anything?" The teacher looked at her carefully. "Are you her grandmother?" "Yes, ma'am." The woman smiled, but it wasn't just any smile. It was one of those charged with intuition. "I'm here about tomorrow's event. Lucy told me you had given her a dress, and I wanted to know if she's going to need help so she can put it on in time. I can talk to the principal to give her a few extra minutes before the presentation." Grace felt her heart beating faster. For the first time, someone outside the house acknowledged her existence, and not as a nuisance, but as an important figure in her granddaughter's life. "Thank you, teacher. Really, thank you. I will take care of it. But if you could keep an eye on her that day, I would greatly appreciate it." "I will. Lucy has a special light. Don't let them turn it off." Grace nodded, and when the teacher left, she sat down to write a new note in her notebook. Lucy is no longer alone, and neither am I. That night, the girl came down earlier than usual. She entered with her eyes shining. "Are you ready for tomorrow, Grandma?" "Are you?" "Very much." Grace took the dress out of its hiding place. She spread it out on the bed. The flower sewn on the chest seemed whiter than ever. Lucy looked at it like someone looking at an amulet. And the next day, the school would witness something no one could imagine. Because that dress, that girl, and that grandmother were going to give a lesson that wasn't in any textbook. The dawn of the big day arrived wrapped in a soft fog, the kind that hangs from the roofs as if the city were holding its breath. The school had decorated its patio with coloured streamers, plastic chairs lined up under white tents, and a modest stage with a blue backdrop, where it read, "Spring Festival, Grade 1 Group B." Lucy woke up before the roosters crowed. She dressed in silence, inside her grandmother's little house, under the only lamp hanging from the ceiling. The blue dress hanging in front of her looked new. It was shining clean, starched, with the freshly sewn white flower still smelling of new fabric. Grace helped her button it up the back, with trembling but delicate hands. She smoothed the lace on the sleeves with her palm, put a thin braid on each side of her face, and lent her a small butterfly brooch she had kept since her son was little. "You look beautiful, sweetie," she whispered. Lucy hugged her without saying anything. There was a contained emotion in her chest, a mix of nerves, joy, and fear. "Do you think my mum will be mad if she sees me in this dress?" Grace knelt down to her height. "It doesn't matter what she says. Today is your day, and this dress is not just clothes. It's love." "That cannot be thrown away." The girl nodded. Then she took her backpack, put her school shoes in it to change after the dance, and walked towards the door with determined steps. Grace watched her walk away with her heart in her throat, not out of fear that Sarah would discover everything, but because in that moment she understood that Lucy was no longer the same. The sweet, shy, obedient girl had become someone capable of defending what she loved, even if it hurt. In the main house, Sarah came down later. Still with her cup of coffee in her hand, she searched the whole house for Lucy and didn't find her. She went up and down the stairs until she reached the patio. "Where is the girl?" Grace came out with a rag in her hand, pretending to be busy cleaning. "She already left for school. She wanted to get there early." Sarah frowned. "And why didn't she tell me?" "Maybe she didn't want to wake you up. She was excited about the festival." "And what clothes did she leave in?" "Her uniform, I suppose." Sarah stared intently at her mother-in-law. For an instant she seemed to suspect something, but she didn't say more. She turned around, muttering something under her breath, and returned inside the house. At school, parents and mothers began to fill the seats. Some girls nervously ran behind the stage, adjusting ribbons and flowers. Lucy's teacher was waiting for her near the classroom with a calm smile. "Ready, my girl?" Lucy nodded with an unusual seriousness for her age. "Yes, teacher. You look beautiful," the teacher said, leaning toward her. "Your grandmother helped you, right?" Lucy smiled. She didn't say anything, but the look confirmed everything. The music for the first number began to play. The parents applauded enthusiastically. A group of children danced a folk song while cell phone cameras captured every step, every smile. When Group 1B was announced, Lucy took her position. The music began, and the children moved to the center of the stage. She was in the front, with the blue dress billowing with every movement. The audience murmured, "Look at that girl. What a beautiful dress. It looks handmade." Her mum really put in the effort, and among the parents in the audience, Sarah appeared. She arrived late, as always. She sat in the back, without much interest. But when she saw her daughter, the expression on her face hardened. The dress. The same dress. The one she had thrown in the trash. For a moment, she thought she was mistaken. But then she saw the flower. The white flower that wasn't there before. Sarah clenched her jaw. Her face changed color. She wanted to get up, but she was surrounded by mothers who were congratulating her. "Your girl is so beautiful. That dress fits her like a glove." "Where did you buy it?" Sarah didn't respond. She just swallowed and forced a smile. Lucy, from the stage, had seen her, but she didn't look down. She kept her head high and finished the number with her head held up. When the song ended, everyone applauded, even some stood up. Grace, who was hidden behind the classroom, watched everything from an open window. She couldn't stop the tears from escaping, not out of sadness, but out of pride. Her granddaughter was there, shining, and no one could say she didn't deserve it. After the event, the children gathered with their families. Most received hugs, photos, flowers. Lucy didn't run to her mother. She went straight to her teacher, who was waiting for her with a small candy wrapped in cellophane. "You earned it, champ," she said. "Can I give it to my grandma?" "Of course." And at that moment, while looking for Grace, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Sarah. "You and I are going to talk at home." Lucy looked at her serenely. "Okay." She didn't argue. She didn't yell. She didn't complain. But that calm unleashed something in Sarah. Something that grew in silence and would explode sooner than anyone imagined. Because that very night, Sarah would do something that neither Grace nor Lucy were prepared to face. Something that couldn't be undone. That same night, after the school event, the whole house breathed a strange air. It wasn't calm. It was something tense, dense, like the moment just before a storm hits. Lucy had dinner in silence, barely touching the rice and vegetables her mother had served. Sarah didn't talk much either. She only watched her out of the corner of her eye, as if measuring her every gesture. When the girl got up to wash her plate, Sarah stopped her with a single phrase. "Tomorrow, you are not going down to your grandmother's. Did you understand me?" Lucy didn't respond. She put away her plate, went up the stairs, and closed her room door without saying a word. She no longer fought. She no longer argued. Because she had learned that well-used silence can be louder than a scream. That night, she didn't go down to sleep with Grace, but not out of fear of her mother. She did it to protect her. She knew that if Sarah discovered her, the punishment would not fall on her, but on the woman who least deserved it. The next day, she went to school with her uniform ironed and a well-made braid that she fixed herself in front of the mirror. She didn't speak to her mother in the morning. She walked to school alone and entered the classroom as if she had been doing it for years without company. Her teacher, Mrs. Nancy, a woman over 60 years old, with a calm voice and maternal manners, greeted her with a different smile that day. She knew what had happened. Other teachers had told her, even a mother who had witnessed the argument after the festival. After the first recess, when the other children went out to the playground to play, the teacher called her to her desk. "Lucy, can you stay for a moment?" The girl nodded. She approached with her notebooks hugged to her chest, expecting a task, a correction, but that wasn't what she received. "I just want to talk to you," the teacher said. "Not as a teacher. As a woman. As someone who sees more than others believe." Lucy frowned. She didn't understand. "I saw your dress yesterday, and I don't want you to lie to me. Who gave it to you?" The girl hesitated for a moment, then looked down. "My grandma." "And did your mum know?" "Not at first, but then yes." The teacher fell silent. She took a deep breath and placed a hand on the girl's. "Look, Lucy, I grew up with my grandmother too. And I know what it feels like to have a mother who doesn't understand how to love us. I'm not saying your mum is bad, but there are people who don't know how to nurture. They only know how to control, and that can hurt a lot." Lucy felt something in her chest move. She didn't cry, but her lips trembled slightly. "Is it wrong that I love my grandma more?" "No, my love. It's not wrong. What's wrong is having to hide it. It's that my mum gets angry. And do you know why?" Lucy shook her head. "Because your light reminds her of everything she can't give, and that confronts her. It scares her, but that's not your fault. You don't have to carry what others don't know how to resolve." The girl took a deep breath. No one had ever spoken to her like that. "Teacher, can I confide something in you?" "Of course, my girl." "My grandma found a letter from my dad. It says strong things. Things about my mom. I don't really understand, but I think my dad wasn't happy, and that he wanted to protect us." The teacher looked at her carefully. "Does that letter exist?" "Yes. My grandma has it. It's handwritten. It says that if something ever happened to him, she should know the truth." Mrs. Nancy felt a shiver run down her spine. "Lucy, I want you to listen to me carefully. That letter could be very important. Not just for you, for your grandmother too, and perhaps to protect you." "Protect me?" "Sometimes words have more power than screams, but you need to be careful. Your mum cannot know that you talked to me about this." "Okay?" The girl nodded. "I just want my grandma to be okay. She's good. She doesn't deserve what my mum tells her." The teacher squeezed her hand gently. "And do you figure all that out by yourself?" "I feel it. In my stomach. Like when something hurts but you don't know how to say it. That's called intuition, and not everyone has it. You do. Take care of it. Lucy returned to her desk, but she was no longer the same. Something in her had been released, a new feeling that perhaps not everything had to remain silent. And the teacher, from her desk, made a mental note of something important. That girl was not alone, and if necessary, she herself would go to the bottom of the story. That afternoon, upon returning home, Sarah was waiting for her with her arms crossed. "Where were you during recess?" "I was with Mrs. Nancy, the teacher." "And what were you talking about with her?" "Nothing, Mum. School stuff." Sarah narrowed her eyes. She didn't entirely believe it, but she didn't insist. That night, Lucy secretly went down to her grandmother's little house. She locked the door and sat on the floor, next to Grace. "Grandma, do you know what intuition is?" Grace looked at her sweetly. "Yes, my daughter. It's when your heart tells you what your mind doesn't understand yet." "And if I feel like something bad is approaching?" Grace fell silent for a moment. Then she said, "Then we have to prepare. Because if something is coming, this time it won't find us silent." And that same night, without knowing it, Sarah would open a box she should never have touched. And what she would find there would be the beginning of her own downfall. It dawned with a bright sun, unlike what had been seen for weeks. The sky was clear, the trees in the school patio swayed with a gentle breeze, and the teachers were decorating the hallways with ribbons early in the morning. The festival was about to begin. Lucy woke up with an accelerated heart, not out of fear, but out of a mix of nerves and hope. That morning she hadn't gone down to sleep with her grandmother, but before dawn, when Sarah was still asleep, she got up in silence and went down barefoot to the little room in the patio. Mrs. Grace was already awake, preparing hot water for coffee. When she saw the girl enter with shining eyes, she knew that day would be different. "Ready, my princess?" she asked with a slight smile. Lucy nodded firmly. "Today, yes, Grandma. Today we are going to shine." Grace took the blue dress out of its hiding place with the same delicacy with which a relic is cared for. She spread it out on the bed and smoothed it with her palms. Lucy took off her pajamas and stood waiting. The grandmother dressed her slowly, buttoning every button, adjusting every fold, as if her life depended on it. Then she braided her hair into 2 long ropes with white ribbons and put the butterfly brooch on one side. "You look beautiful, my girl." "It's because of you," Lucy replied, turning to look at herself in the mirror hanging on the wall. And for the first time in a long time, she felt that way. Beautiful, valuable, loved. Grace wrapped a pair of black shoes in a cloth bag. The girl would put them in her backpack to put them on before the dance. She couldn't leave the house wearing the dress. Sarah would notice immediately. "Do you know the steps well?" "Yes, Grandma." "The teacher says I'm in the first row. Then dance with your heart. Let it show who you are." Lucy hugged her tightly and left the little house through the back door, the one that led to the alley, the one they almost never used. She went up the sidewalk of the block, as if coming from the store, and entered through the main door just as Sarah had left the bathroom. "You're late." "I went to look for my notebooks." "And why are your eyes so red?" "It's the sun." Sarah didn't pay her any more attention. She poured coffee for herself and cereal without milk for the girl. "Finish quickly. I'll go to the festival later." "I can't miss work." Lucy ate in silence, put the uniform in her backpack, and left. On the corner, Mrs. Nancy, her teacher, was waiting for her, just as they had agreed. "Do you have it?" The girl opened her backpack and showed her the carefully folded dress. "Very good," the teacher said. "Come to the classroom with me. You can change there." The classroom was empty. Some desks still had cookie crumbs from the day before. The teacher closed the door, and Lucy dressed with her help. She tied her ribbons, adjusted her shoes, and gave her a hug before going out to the patio. "You are not an ordinary girl, Lucy. Today you are going to prove it." The girl nodded, speechless. She walked toward the stage with her head held high, as if every step was part of a promise. The event began with songs, then came poetry, and finally the dances. When it was Lucy's group's turn, the music started with a folk song beat, cheerful, strong, alive. She was in the center of the group, surrounded by classmates in colorful dresses, but Lucy's blue stood out like a star in the sky. The embroidered daisies seemed to bloom with every spin, with every firm step. The audience applauded. Fathers and mothers took out their cell phones. A mother commented out loud, "Look at that girl. Could she be Sarah's daughter?" Another replied, "Yes, but I've never seen her like this. What a beautiful dress. It looks like it was made with a lot of love." Sarah had arrived a few minutes earlier, dressed in her work blouse and a hardened expression. From the back of the patio, she recognized the dress instantly. The same one she had thrown away. The same one she herself had emotionally trampled on. She felt a knot in her stomach. Not out of pride, out of rage, out of shame, because she knew everyone around her was congratulating her for something that wasn't hers. "How lucky your daughter is, huh? So loved by her grandmother." Those words tore her apart, inside, like broken glass. Lucy, from the stage, saw her, but she didn't look down. On the contrary, she maintained her presence with a serenity that did not belong to a 6-year-old girl. She finished the number, bowed in reverence along with her classmates, and stepped off the stage with dignity. When the event ended, the children ran to hug their parents. Lucy didn't. She walked toward Mrs. Nancy, who was waiting for her with a handkerchief to wipe the sweat from her forehead. "Did I do well? You did perfectly." Then, as if something inside her was activated, the teacher knelt down to her height and said, "Would you like us to talk to someone who can help you? Who can help you and your grandmother?" Lucy nodded, but before responding, a dark shadow appeared behind her. It was Sarah. "Can we talk alone?" The teacher stood tall. "Of course, but with respect, please. We are in a school." Sarah knelt down in front of the girl. "You are coming with me. And that dress, I want you to take it off as soon as we get home." Lucy didn't move. "I'm not going to take it off." "What did you say?" "I'm not going to take it off," she repeated. "My grandmother gave it to me. And I earned it." Sarah grabbed her arm. "Don't you ever challenge me in front of anyone again, Lucy. You don't give the orders." The teacher took a step forward. "With respect, Mrs. Sarah, you cannot treat her like that in front of others. If you want to talk, we'll do it in the principal's office." Sarah let go of the girl with contained force. "I don't need anyone to tell me how to raise my daughter." "Then don't do it in public, because you are not raising her. You are hurting her." Sarah stood motionless. Then she turned around without answering and walked away among the other mothers, who were watching everything with wide eyes. That same afternoon, Grace was waiting sitting on the patio bench with a glass of iced tea and her legs covered with a blanket. When she saw Lucy arrive, still wearing the dress, she ran to hug her. "I saw you, my love. You danced as if you were flying." Lucy handed her the handkerchief the teacher had given her. "Mrs. Nancy wants to talk to you. She says she knows someone who can help us." Grace fell silent. "Help us with what? With telling the truth?" And as she said those words, she didn't know that Sarah, from the window of the second floor, was watching them with her eyes full of fire. That night, something would break forever, because Sarah was no longer going to stand idly by, and this time, she wouldn't come alone. The Monday following the school festival dawned quieter than usual. The neighborhood streets woke up with their usual noises: brooms sweeping the sidewalk, children hurrying to school, ladies watering plants from the gates. Everything seemed the same on the outside. But inside Sarah's house, something had changed. Sarah was preparing her coffee with a stiffness in her body that hadn't left her since Saturday. She moved with abrupt movements, as if she wanted to break something with every step. She wasn't speaking. She was barely looking. The image of Lucy in the blue dress still ran through her mind like a thorn she couldn't pull out. The girl came down with her backpack on her shoulder and her hair braided, ready to go to school. "Good morning, Mum. You have 5 minutes to eat breakfast." Lucy poured herself a cup of cold milk and a slice of bread. She didn't complain. She was used to the fact that love didn't come from the kitchen. While she ate, Sarah watched her without speaking. There was something in the girl's gaze that deeply bothered her. It wasn't rebellion or defiance. It was calm. And calm in someone who has been hurt is more dangerous than a scream. "Today you are not going down to your grandmother's. I want you to help me clean your room. After school, yes. No. After school you stay upstairs. Enough of so many visits down there." Lucy didn't say anything. She just finished her bread, stood up, and went out the door. Sarah squeezed the cup so hard that she broke it unintentionally. The hot coffee spilled onto the table. "Damn it," she muttered as she ran for a rag. That same morning, Grace was sitting on the bench, shelling fresh peas for lunch. She greeted the neighbours, as usual. Some returned the greeting kindly, others with more enthusiasm than usual. Even a lady, Mrs. Betty, stopped in front of her gate. "You're Lucy's grandmother, right?" "Yes, ma'am. Why?" "I just wanted to tell you that your granddaughter looked beautiful at the festival. My daughter still talks about her. They say she looked like an angel dancing in that blue dress." Grace smiled humbly. "Thank you very much. That's kind. And well, you know how things are in the neighborhood. They say you were the one who gave her the dress. Is that true?" Grace hesitated. She looked toward the house, took a deep breath. "Yes, ma'am. With a lot of effort. But yes." "Well, that's good. Really. Because if it were up to the mother, that girl wouldn't even have a ribbon in her hair." The neighbor left, but her words didn't. Grace felt something was stirring in the neighborhood. The story was coming out of confinement, and not because of her, but because of the girl. That same day, while Sarah was walking down the street toward work, she was intercepted by another mother from the school. "Hey, Sarah, your daughter stole the show, huh?" "Yes, well," she replied, uncomfortable. "And that dress? Gorgeous. Where did you buy it?" "I want one just like it for my niece." Sarah feigned a smile. "A friend sent it to me from California. It was a gift." The other woman nodded. "Well, how lucky. Although several moms are already saying that it was the grandmother who made it for her." Sarah stared at her, annoyed. "Who told you that?" "Oh, woman, you know how the neighborhood is. Everything gets known." By the afternoon, the comment had already spread through several blocks. At the convenience store, the bakery, in the tortilla line, everyone was talking about the blue dress and how it was scorned before it shone on stage. They say the mum threw it in the trash and the girl rescued it. They say the grandma sells candy at the traffic light to save up for the girl. They say the mother is ashamed of her mother-in-law, but takes all the credit. They say the girl doesn't even want to go up to her house anymore. They say, they say, they say. Grace listened to bits of those conversations while washing clothes in the patio. She didn't say anything, but her heart pounded hard, because although all that hurt, it was also the first time that the truth, however small, began to come to light. That night, Lucy came down, as always, with soft steps. She brought with her a piece of paper folded in four. She handed it to her grandmother. "I wrote something at school today. The teacher asked me to keep it with you." Grace unfolded the paper. It was a composition. "My hero doesn't wear a cape. She has grey braids and hands that smell like soap and corn. My hero doesn't shout. She whispers. She doesn't punish. She teaches. My hero doesn't have a car or luxuries, but she has time, and that is worth more. My hero is my grandmother, because she taught me that love is not bought, it is sown." Like a blue dress, Grace covered her mouth with one hand. She cried in silence, not out of sadness, but because she knew that her life, although ignored by many, had not been in vain. But while she hugged her granddaughter upstairs in the big house, Sarah opened her closet and began to take out old clothes. She was searching, rummaging, until she found a small white, square box that she had saved years ago. And inside that box, there was something she never thought she would see again. A wrinkled photograph, a note written in Robert's handwriting, and an envelope that read, "If something happens to me, Mum needs to know." Sarah looked at it as if it burned. Her face paled, because she didn't know that Lucy had already seen that letter, and even less, that Grace wasn't going to keep quiet this time. The next morning was silent, but not peaceful. In Sarah's house, every corner seemed to contain dense air, as if the walls themselves knew that something had been removed from the past. The box Sarah had found was still on her bed. She hadn't dared to open the letter, but just seeing the handwriting, she already knew what it said. And what worried her most was imagining how much her mother-in-law knew. Grace, for her part, didn't know that Sarah had found the box, but she did feel a change in the atmosphere. She knew it. It was the same one she had felt years ago, when Robert began to pull away. That coldness without apparent cause, that pause between words, that premonition that doesn't warn, but grips you in the stomach. Lucy, innocent but intuitive, also perceived it. That morning she didn't come down for breakfast. She changed in silence, her eyes fixed on the notebook where she had written her composition. It hurt her to keep secrets, but it hurt her more to betray her grandmother's heart. When she arrived at school, Mrs. Nancy was waiting for her with a serious expression. Not harsh, serious. There was something in her face that revealed concern. "Lucy, can we talk for a moment before the others come in?" The girl nodded. They sat at the desk, away from the hustle and bustle of the playground. "Does your mum know you were with me after the festival?" "No, but she saw me talking to you." "Did she say anything to you?" "She said she didn't want me to dress like that again, that the dress will never be seen again." The teacher sighed. "Do you feel that you are in danger at home?" Lucy looked down. She bit her lips. "Sometimes I'm afraid for my grandma, not for me." "Has your mum done anything to her?" The girl shook her head, but then added, "She yells at her. She humiliates her. She treats her like she's worthless. And when she thinks we don't see her, she insults her." The teacher fell silent. "Do you remember how your dad died?" Lucy shook her head again, more slowly. "I only know he had an accident, but Grandma never talks about it. And my mum even less." The teacher looked at her with a mixture of compassion and firmness. "Lucy, I need to know if that letter you mentioned exists." The one from your dad. It exists. My grandma saved it. I saw it, but I didn't understand all of it. Do you think she would let me see it? The girl thought for a moment. Yes, if you ask her with respect. Yes. Nancy got up. She walked toward the window. From there she could see the neighborhood, the humble houses, the unpaved streets. She was thinking, calculating. I'm going to talk to someone I trust. I need you not to tell your mum anything. Can you do that? Yes, teacher. And your grandma? Does she trust you? Yes, and I trust her more than anyone. The teacher knelt down to her height. Then we are going to protect her, yes, but carefully. What we are doing is not a game. There are adults who can hurt when they feel discovered. That afternoon, after classes, Mrs. Nancy went to visit a friend of hers, a retired social worker who lived a few blocks from the school. She told her everything, the story, the signs, the girl's words. And what do you want to do, Nancy? See the letter, confirm what the girl says, and if it's true, then act. But I don't want to hurt the grandmother. She's the only one taking care of the girl. The woman nodded. I can accompany you tomorrow, if you want. But first, we have to talk to the grandmother. Without pressure, from woman to woman. Meanwhile, at home, Sarah didn't go down to the patio. She didn't go out to shop. She didn't knock on Grace's door. She stayed in her room with the box open on the bed. She looked at Robert's photograph with his newborn daughter. She looked at the handwritten note, and she looked at the unopened envelope that read, "For Mum, if something happens to me." The rage seeped through her pores, because she knew that letter didn't favor her. She knew there were things he never said out loud, but left in writing. She wasn't afraid. She was furious. Furious because that dress had uncovered a truth that she had buried with dirt, silence, and shouts. That night, she went down to the patio without making a sound. She entered Grace's little house without announcing herself. She found her sitting, sewing an old pair of pants. We need to talk. Grace didn't look up. Go ahead. Sarah stood in front of her. She held the letter in her hand. Is this what you've been using to poison my daughter? Grace left the needle on the table. That is not poison. It is the truth. What do you want? For Lucy to hate me? Is that what you want? I want her to live without fear. Without lies, without screams. Sarah clenched her teeth. And you think you are the saint in this story? I'm not a saint. But not a coward either. You have no right to interfere in my house or in my parenting. I didn't interfere. You left me here when it was convenient for you. But now that your daughter found in me what you cannot give her, it bothers you. Sarah remained silent. She was breathing hard. The letter trembled in her hand. If this letter leaves here, I swear you will regret it. Grace got up calmly. She looked her directly in the eyes. I'm not afraid, Sarah, because I am no longer alone, because now I know that there are people watching. And you should be afraid too, because what you did can no longer be hidden. And at the door of the little house, without either of them knowing it, was Lucy, listening to everything. Her small fingers squeezed the gate, and on her face, for the first time, a decision was etched. Because if no one else was going to speak, then she would. Mrs. Grace woke up that morning with a sharp pain in her chest. It wasn't physical. It was the kind of discomfort that can't be cured with tea or ointments, because it doesn't come from the body, but from memory. She sat on the edge of her bed, covered herself with her scarf, and stared into the darkness for a long time. Outside, the silence of the neighborhood was total. as if the world had decided to suspend time for an instant. Inside, in the little house in the back, only the slight creaking of the old wood could be heard. She didn't know how much Lucy had heard the night before. She didn't ask. The girl slept beside her, hugging her arm as if seeking refuge. Grace didn't want to break that rest. But inside, she couldn't ignore that something had changed. Sarah had found the letter, and that could only mean conflict. A strong one with no return. As soon as the first ray of sun came out, she got up. She washed her face with cold water. She lit the coal stove to heat coffee, and she took a small wooden box from her trunk where she kept clippings, photos, old papers, bus tickets, things that no one would consider important, except her. Among all that, there was a photograph. In the image, Robert was about 12 years old. He was standing, his t-shirt stained with dirt, next to a tricycle he had repaired himself with wire. His smile was that of a child who needed nothing more than the wind in his face. Grace looked at him with misty eyes. She sat in the chair by the window, with the photo in her hands, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to remember. My son, I didn't know how to protect you from her. I saw you leave in silence, keeping things you didn't say. I wanted to talk, but you wouldn't listen to me. And now it's your daughter who asks me not to keep quiet. I don't know if I have the strength, but I do know that I can no longer live with this inside. Lucy woke up shortly after. She stretched like any girl her age, but when she saw her grandmother with teary eyes and the photo in her hands, she knew it was time. Is that my dad? Grace nodded. She handed her the photo. This is what he was like when he was your age. Was he happy? When he was a child, yes. Afterward, he faded. The girl stroked the image with her fingers. Because of my mom. Grace didn't answer, not with words. She just leaned in and hugged her. She squeezed her hard, as if that were the only possible answer. Later, after Lucy left for school, Grace was left alone in the little house. But that solitude didn't last long. At noon, a gentle knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. It was Mrs. Nancy, the teacher, accompanied by a woman in her 50s, with glasses hanging from her neck and a serious expression. Good morning, Mrs. Grace. Excuse us for coming without notice. This is Ms. Hortense, a social worker. Grace remained silent, not out of fear, but because she didn't expect the matter to progress so quickly. Come in, please. The women entered. They sat in the 2 available chairs, and the teacher spoke first. Mrs. Grace, Lucy told us something. Things that are sensitive. We know you don't want conflicts, but there is something more important than peace, and that is protection. Hortense intervened. We found out that there is a letter written by your son, something he left before he died. Is that true? Grace nodded slowly. Yes, it's here. She stood up, went to her trunk, and took out the envelope. She didn't hand it over immediately. She held it with both hands. It's not easy, you know. This letter has been kept for years. And opening it is like opening a wound that never properly closed. We understand, the social worker said softly, but it could be the difference between leaving everything as it is or breaking the cycle. Grace handed over the letter. Hortense opened it, read it in silence. As she read, her eyebrows furrowed. Mrs. Nancy also read it over her shoulder. When she finished, Hortense placed the paper on the table. This is powerful, and it is signed. Robert gave it to me 2 days before his accident. I don't know if he was planning to leave or if he already knew something. And why didn't you do anything? Because I had no proof of anything. Because I was afraid they would take Lucy away from me. Because I felt alone. and because when an older woman speaks, no one listens to her. Mrs. Nancy took her hand. I am listening to you. The social worker stood up. I am going to write a report, officially, but first I need something else. Would you be willing to speak in front of an authority if this becomes a legal matter? Grace swallowed. For my granddaughter? Yes. That night, when Lucy returned from school, the grandmother told her what had happened. Not in detail, only what was necessary. They are going to help us, my love. But we must be patient. This is not going to happen overnight. And what if Mum finds out? Don't worry about that. I'm going to protect you. Lucy approached her backpack. She took out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to her. My teacher gave me this. She says it's an authorization. If you sign it, she can go with me to an interview. Grace read the document. She didn't entirely understand the legal language, but the intention was clear. She looked at her granddaughter, stroked her cheek, and signed. It is done. Upstairs, in the main house, Sarah read and reread the letter. There were days when she didn't eat well. She slept poorly. Something inside her was stirring with a mixture of remorse and rage. She felt that everything she had hidden was starting to come to light, and she wasn't going to allow that. That very night, she went down to the patio with firm steps. She didn't knock on the door. She entered without asking permission. Grace was folding clothes. She looked at her serenely. What do you need? Sarah held the letter up high. Is this what you are using to poison my daughter? That's what you hid for years. This doesn't prove anything. It proves what Lucy already feels, and you think you are going to keep her. She is mine, my daughter. Grace took a deep breath. I don't want to keep her. I want her to grow up without fear. Can you give her that? Sarah took a step forward. She leaned over her, her eyes full of fury. If you or that teacher dare to get me into trouble, I swear I will kick you out of here. I'll throw you into the street. Grace didn't move. Do what you have to do, Sarah, because I have also started doing what I have to do. Sarah was speechless for an instant, but as she left, she let out a threat that made the walls tremble. We'll see who keeps the girl. That phrase hung in the air, and from the stairs, Lucy, again, had heard everything, this time without fear, with clarity, because at that moment she understood that if anyone had to defend her grandmother, it would be her, and she wouldn't do it alone. That night, after Sarah left the little house with her face flushed with rage, Lucy came down the stairs without anyone hearing her. The door was ajar. Grace was still sitting at the table, motionless, as if her daughter-in-law's words had been left floating in the air like thick smoke. The girl entered in silence and carefully closed the door. Grandma, she whispered. What did the letter say? Grace looked up. Her gaze no longer trembled as before. It was a gaze that had aged suddenly. It's a letter that your father left me when he couldn't take it anymore. And why did you keep it for so long? Because I was afraid. Because they told me that if I spoke, I could lose you. And because I believed it. But not anymore. Lucy sat down next to her, stretched out her hand, and gently touched her wrist. Can you show it to me? Grace hesitated for a few seconds. Then she slowly got up, went to her wooden trunk, and took out an envelope. It wasn't the same one Sarah had snatched days ago. This one was hidden inside an old prayer notebook, with a torn cover. It was the first version of the letter, a draft, the original. The grandmother placed it on the table. Lucy unfolded it. The handwriting was clumsy, but firm. She read it out loud, slowly as if every word were a seed planted in her chest. Mum, if you are reading this, it's because I didn't dare to tell you in person. I'm afraid. Sarah is not who she pretends to be. She won't let me get close to you or talk to you. She tells me you are a burden, that you are just in the way. I don't believe her, but she has me trapped. She threatens to take Lucy away from me if I contradict her. I feel like I'm living with a stranger, and that is killing me faster than any accident. If something happens to me, please take care of my daughter. Do everything I couldn't do for you. Forgive me. Robert. Lucy remained silent. She didn't cry, but her breathing became deeper. Did my mum read this too? No. She read another copy. This is the one your father gave me with his own hands. The one I kept as a treasure, but also as a curse. And why didn't you show it to anyone before? Because back then no one believed me. I was the bitter mother-in-law, the old woman who interfered in everything. I had no voice. Lucy read the last lines again. Do everything I couldn't do for you. For you, Grace repeated, lowering her head. For you, my girl. The next day, while Sarah left early for work, Lucy headed to school with the envelope inside her backpack. That morning, she didn't want to talk to anyone. She walked in silence, her eyes fixed on the floor, as if carrying something very heavy for her size. Mrs. Nancy saw her arrive from the entrance. She didn't say anything. She just waited. When they were alone, in the classroom, Lucy took out the envelope and placed it on the desk. My grandma said it's the original, that it's the first one my dad wrote. Nancy took it with utmost care, as if carrying thin glass. She opened it, read it calmly, and upon finishing, let out a deep sigh. This is not just a simple letter. It is a declaration, a piece of evidence. And it is enough to open an investigation. Lucy swallowed. And what will happen to my mum? I don't know that yet, Lucy, but I do know that you are no longer alone. That same afternoon, the social worker, Ms. Hortense, returned to the house. This time she came with a notebook and a recorder. She entered the patio little house with respect, sat down across from Grace, and explained. Now we are going to take an official statement. I need you to speak from the beginning. Grace adjusted her scarf, took a deep breath, and began. My son Robert married Sarah when he was 20 years old. From the beginning, I noticed that she didn't want to have anything to do with me. She treated me courteously but coldly. When Lucy was born, everything got worse. She forbade me to visit them. She told me I was in the way. One day my son came to see me with a pale face and told me he was afraid of losing his daughter. What did he mean by that? That Sarah had told him that, if he spoke badly of her, she would disappear with the girl, that she had somewhere to go, that she could do it. And after that, 2 days after telling me that, he died in an accident. According to the report, it was a motorcycle fall. But I always believed it wasn't that simple. He was going too slow to lose control. He didn't drink. He didn't get distracted. Do you think it was provoked? I have no proof. But I have gut feeling, and that letter he gave me confirmed it. Hortense turned off the recorder. Her eyes shone with indignation. Mrs. Grace, this is no longer just a family conflict. This is a story of control, emotional violence, and perhaps something more. But there is a minor involved, and if you allow me, I will make sure someone hears this story. I won't give you permission, Grace replied in a firm voice. I will give you my trust. That night, as they prepared for bed, Lucy lay down next to her grandmother and asked, Do you think my dad is proud? Grace stroked her hair. I think he is here, watching us. And if he could speak to you, he would tell you that you did the right thing. Lucy closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she fell asleep with a smile. But in the main house, the darkness wouldn't let Sarah sleep. And the next morning, a couple of knocks on the door wouldn't let anyone sleep, because social services had arrived and they were coming to ask questions that she didn't want to answer. The knocks on the door sounded exactly at 8:15 in the morning. 3 firm knocks, without pause, with that rhythm that leaves no room for doubt. In the main house, Sarah was just taking the first sip of coffee when the sound froze her blood. She left the cup on the table without finishing swallowing. Lucy was already dressed, with her backpack on her shoulder, sitting silently in a corner of the kitchen. She didn't say anything. She just watched. Sarah peeked through the curtain. 2 women were waiting on the other side of the gate, one with a familiar face, the social worker Hortense, and another with a Child Protective Services vest, a clipboard in hand. Next to them, a tall man with a serene voice, according to the patch on his uniform, was a child protection officer. The woman opened the door with a tense expression, as if she didn't know whether to feign courtesy or defend herself. "How can I help you?" Hortense spoke kindly, but without beating around the bush. "We have come to conduct an evaluation visit. We need to verify the environment of the minor Lucy Ortiz and speak with you and with Mrs. Grace Ramirez." Sarah frowned. "An evaluation? Based on what?" "We received a complaint," the officer intervened. "Information about possible dynamics of emotional abuse within this home. A letter signed by the minor's father, Robert Ortiz, has also been mentioned." Sarah's mouth tightened. Her tone hardened. "And who brought that letter into all of this?" "The letter is real, ma'am," Hortense said. "We have it on file and the content is very serious. We are going to need you to cooperate." "I haven't abused anyone," she replied firmly. "That woman," she pointed toward the patio, "has been trying to interfere in my life for years, and now she wants to take my daughter." "Ma'am," the officer interrupted, "no one is here to take your daughter. We are here to find out if the girl is living in a healthy environment. That's all." Lucy looked down. In her small chest, her heartbeats were drumming. "Can we speak with your daughter alone?" Hortense asked. Sarah hesitated. Then she released with clenched teeth. "Yes, but I want to know what she says." "It is not what you want," the other social worker replied diplomatically. "It is what the law requires." In the backyard, Mrs. Grace was sweeping the ground with her broom. Seeing the group enter, she was not surprised. She simply left the broom leaning against the wall, wiped her hands on her scarf, and greeted them with respect. She was expecting them. "Mrs. Grace," the assistant said, "we are going to need to speak with you too. But first, your granddaughter is going to answer some questions." Lucy walked toward the little house. Her hands were sweaty, but her head was held high. She knew that what she was about to say could change everything, but she also knew that if she didn't do it now, her silence would become complicit. They sat her in the chair next to the table, where her grandmother had served them bread and hot chocolate so many times. Hortense placed a recorder on the table, and in a calm voice began, "Lucy, we are going to ask you some questions. You don't have to be afraid. No one is here to punish you. We just want you to tell us the truth. Is that all right?" The girl nodded. "Who usually takes care of you?" "My grandma." "Not your mum?" "My mum works almost all day. When she's home, she yells. She doesn't like me to be with my grandma. Sometimes she says my grandma is worthless. Sometimes she insults her." "Have you witnessed those arguments?" "Yes, many times." "Has your mum hit you?" Lucy hesitated. "Only once she pulled me hard. It left a bruise on my arm. But what hurts the most is what she says." "Like what?" That I am a burden, that I am just like my dad, that she wishes I wasn't as stubborn as him. Does she punish you? Yes. She takes away my things. She locks me in. She forbids me to go down to my grandma's room. And why do you want to be with her? Because I'm not afraid there. Because I'm listened to there. I'm hugged. I'm loved. The recorder kept spinning. Do you know what your dad said in that letter? Yes. I read it with my grandma. My dad was afraid. He said my mom wouldn't let him talk to her, that she threatened him. And do you believe him? Yes. Why? Lucy answered without hesitation. Because I've felt the same thing. After the interview, the officials sat down with Grace. She recounted everything with the firm voice of someone who has cried so much that not a single tear can escape anymore. She showed them the original letter. She told them about the day of the accident, of Robert's silences, of the humiliations Sarah inflicted on her in front of the girl, of how Lucy began to change since she first came down to her little house. When she finished, Hortense closed her notebook and put away the recorder. This is not going to be ignored, Ma'am. But you should know that the processes are slow, and if Sarah wants, she can file legal actions. Are you willing to stand by what you said? Grace stood up slowly, looked inside the house, and then fixed her gaze on Robert's photo that still hung over her altar. I am willing to do anything, because this time, I am not going to keep quiet. That night, the rumor in the neighborhood was already running from house to house. Did you hear that Child Protective Services came to Sarah's house? They say the girl made some serious statements. The grandma has a letter from the dad, before he died. They say Mrs. Grace is going to get custody. And in the midst of all that murmuring, Sarah walked around the house like a caged animal. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't eating. She was only thinking about one thing. Who dared to tell everything? And looking into Lucy's eyes, she knew the answer. What she didn't know was that the next step was already underway, and it would come from someone she never thought would interfere, a person who didn't talk much, but who had seen and was willing to testify. Sarah hadn't slept since the night before. She had spent whole hours sitting on the sofa with Robert's letter on her lap, an unlit cigarette in one hand, and her glazed eyes fixed on the floor. Her world, carefully built on silences and manipulations, was beginning to crumble. And not because of rumors or neighbors, but because of a girl, her daughter, and an old woman who wouldn't break. The visit from Child Protective Services had left her shaking, not because of the authority, but because of what it meant. Someone, several people, were no longer afraid of her. That hurt her more than any accusation. But what no one knew, not even Grace, was that Sarah also had secrets. One of those dark ones, the kind that aren't written in letters or shared out loud, the kind that are buried until the ground bursts open. That morning, while Lucy was already at school and Grace was making hot chocolate on her new stove donated by a neighbor, Sarah went up to Robert's room. She had kept it closed since his death. She used that space as a storage room, but deep down, it hurt her to enter. She knelt down in front of the old wardrobe, opened the third drawer, the most forgotten one, and took out a grey notebook with a scratched cover. Inside there were clippings, notes, a sheet with telephone numbers, and among them, a folded sheet. It was a medical form with the name Robert Ortiz. Diagnosis: severe depressive disorder. Sarah read it with her lips pressed together. She knew it. She always knew it. Robert had been going to therapy in secret, and she discovered it a week before the accident. That night, they argued like never before. He yelled that he didn't love her, that he was afraid of her. that if something happened to him, it would be her fault. And then she threatened him. "If you open your mouth, you won't see Lucy again," she told him, in the quietest, cruelest voice she could muster. Robert left that night. He didn't sleep there again. The next morning, he was reported dead on the highway. According to the report, the motorcycle's brakes failed on a curve. But Sarah knew it. It wasn't an accident. He didn't want to slow down. He wanted to escape, or end everything. And since then, she carried that doubt that gnawed at her. That's why she hated Grace. Not because she was poor, not because she was old. She hated her because Robert loved her, because he talked to her, because she knew the side that Sarah could never touch. And that made her, in her mind, a threat. Now that everything was coming to light, Sarah began to feel like a cornered prey. The letter, the teacher, the girl, the neighborhood. Everyone seemed to be standing up against her. But if she knew how to do anything, it was to counterattack. That same afternoon, she went to the school without warning. She showed up at the principal's office with her best concerned mother face. "I'm here to request my daughter's complete record," she said in a soft voice. "I want to see if anyone has spoken to her without my consent." The principal received her cautiously. She had already been informed of what happened by Mrs. Nancy and Child Protective Services. She offered her a seat. Sarah didn't take it. "I also want to know if they have visited my house, if they have entered without a court order." The principal observed her. "No, ma'am. No one has entered without an order. But we have received concerning reports, and your daughter is under monitoring." Sarah stood up. "Well, let them know that anything that happens to my daughter will be your responsibility for letting a crazy old woman and a frustrated teacher poison her." And she left, without another word. Meanwhile, at Mrs. Alley's house, where Grace was now living, the girl drew in silence. A tree, a hummingbird, and a little house with a tin roof. At the door, a grandma and a girl were holding hands. "Is that what you miss?" Allie asked tenderly. "No, it's what I want." Allie wiped her hands on her apron and poured her a glass of iced tea. "And do you know that it can be yours soon?" Lucy smiled slightly. "Even if my mum doesn't want it? Even if your mum yells, speaks out, or gets mad? What matters is what you have lived, and what you deserve." That night, Mrs. Nancy visited Hortense with a proposal. "I have someone else who wants to talk. It's not a relative, but she has witnessed many things." "Who?" "Mrs. Carmen, the next-door neighbor. She says she heard arguments, that she saw things, that she never wanted to get involved, but now she can't keep quiet." "Perfect. The more voices, the better. And the letter?" "The letter is already in the file, and that's enough to open a formal proceeding. We only need one signature, the judge's." The teacher put her hands to her chest. "So there can be a hearing?" "Yes, but it will be tense. And Sarah is going to do everything she can to come out clean. And if she succeeds, then it will be for lack of more courage, not for lack of evidence." Grace didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window with her son's notebook in her hands. She reviewed his notes, his drawings, his small phrases scribbled on the margins. One hurt her especially. "I want to run, but I have a rope tied around my neck. I don't know if it's me or if it's her." Grace pressed the notebook against her chest. She didn't cry, not anymore. But inside, her heart was burning. Lucy slept beside her, with her paused breathing, with a paper flower between her fingers, which she had made for her grandmother at school. And while the girl dreamed of a house full of peace, in the other house, the one upstairs, Sarah opened her cell phone, looking for a contact she had promised never to call again. But that night, she dialed. "Good evening. Do you remember me? It's Sarah. I need a favor. A big one. And no, it's not legal. But they are taking my daughter away from me." And from the other side of the line, a voice replied, "Tell me what you want me to do." And what Sarah was going to ask for would not only change the course of the case, it could end in a tragedy. The first to notice were the neighbours who usually sat at noon on the sidewalks with their fans and folding chairs. One of them, Mrs. Clara, had been a nurse in her youth and had a radar for reading faces. That afternoon she saw Sarah leave her house with a frown and a lost look, talking to herself with her cell phone in her hand. "That woman is plotting something," she whispered to Mrs. Lupe, the lady who sold tamales on Sundays. "She's like a wounded animal." "Well, I wouldn't be surprised. You saw how they've cornered her. The teacher, Child Protective Services, the social worker, and now the girl won't even look at her." "Yes, but when a woman like that feels cornered, she does stupid things." And they weren't wrong. That same night, the whole neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Grace had gone out to the store for a quart of milk and a roll for dinner. Lucy was waiting for her with Mrs. Allie, sitting in the patio, doing her homework under the warm light of the hanging street lamp. But as soon as the grandmother rounded the corner back, she noticed that something was not right. In front of the alley gate, an unknown man was leaning against the wall, pretending to talk on the phone. When he saw her approach, he looked down. Grace ignored him. She crossed the street and went straight into the house, but her heart was already pounding hard. That night, Grace didn't sleep, and neither did Mrs. Carmen, the next-door neighbor, who, from her window, clearly saw how after 11 o'clock that same man returned. He walked slowly as if patrolling. Then he stopped in front of the main house gate. He knocked once. Sarah opened. They spoke softly. They argued. And then Sarah handed him a small envelope. Mrs. Carmen didn't hear words, but she understood everything with her eyes. The next day, when Lucy left for school, she found a handwritten sheet of paper taped to the patio door. "You are interfering where you shouldn't. Stop inventing things. This is not a game." The girl froze. She recognized the handwriting. It wasn't her mother's, but it was someone she had seen sign documents with that script. A man, an old neighborhood acquaintance, a friend of Sarah's since she was young, former agent, former something. Everyone knew him as Blondie. Lucy ripped off the paper and put it in her backpack. She didn't say anything. But that day, before entering the classroom, she went up to Mrs. Nancy and handed it to her. "They left this on the door." The teacher read it. She took a deep breath. She knelt down in front of the girl. "Do you feel in danger?" "No, but I'm afraid for my grandma." Nancy nodded. Then she called the social worker. That same day, the case file was transferred to the Family and Child Protection Division. Things were no longer just internal. Now they were formal, serious. Meanwhile, Grace still didn't know about the note. That afternoon she went out to sell candy again, not out of necessity, but out of dignity. She didn't want to feel trapped or useless. She walked to the traffic light where she had started her crusade for the blue dress years ago. But that time, her legs didn't respond the same way. Her ankles hurt. Her arms trembled. Her heart was beating too fast. She sold 2 bags. She sat down in the shade of a tree, and just when she was thinking of going back, she felt someone observing her. It was a tall man, the same one Mrs. Carmen had seen at the gate. Grace looked down. She got up as best she could, grabbing her basket. She crossed the street. She walked faster, and she didn't stop until she got home. That night, her whole body ached. Lucy was waiting for her with a paper flower she had made at school. "I'm going to take care of you, Grandma. No one is going to touch you anymore, or silence you." Grace hugged her, and while the girl fell asleep on her lap, she stroked her hair tenderly. But inside, she felt something she couldn't explain, a premonition. In another part of the neighborhood, Mrs. Carmen knocked on Mrs. Nancy's door. The teacher received her with surprise. "Sorry for coming unannounced, but I saw things, and I feel indebted." "Indebted to whom?" "To that girl, and to that woman who has raised her granddaughter alone without hurting anyone." Nancy let her in. Carmen told her what she saw. The man, the envelope, the encounter in the early morning. Everything. The teacher took notes. She called Hortense. "We have a witness. She saw everything." "Then we will act," the social worker replied. "But be careful. Mrs. Sarah is no longer just scared. She is desperate." "What do we do?" "Whatever we have to do. But first, we're going to talk to Lucy, and with Grace, because what's coming won't be easy, or fast, but it can change their lives." The next morning, Lucy came down with tired eyes. The paper flower was still on the table. Grace was drinking her coffee with trembling hands. Before leaving for school, the girl turned and said, "Grandma, will you come with me to school today? I want you to see something." Grace was surprised. "What thing?" "They are going to read something in the classroom today. Something I wrote." The woman smiled. "A composition?" "No, a promise." Grace didn't understand, but she nodded. "Of course, my love." And what Lucy had written would make the whole class cry and infuriate someone who didn't know how to stop a girl who was no longer afraid. The morning Lucy took her grandmother to school, something changed in the atmosphere. It wasn't just the expectation she herself generated with her soft, firm voice, nor the protective gaze of Grace by her side, nor the murmuring of the other children watching with curiosity. It was the fact that, for the first time, the truth was going to be spoken out loud, no longer as a secret or as a whisper, but as an act of courage. Mrs. Nancy had organized an activity called Words That Embrace, in which the children had to read a text written by them for someone special. Some prepared messages for their mothers, others for their fathers, siblings, even pets. Lucy asked to read at the end, and when her turn came, she asked her grandmother to sit inside the classroom right in front of her. Grace hesitated, but the teacher offered her her own chair. All the children looked at her with respect. Some even knew she was the grandmother of the blue dress. Lucy went up to the small makeshift stage and took out a sheet of paper folded in four. "I want to read something to the person who taught me what courage is, to the person who gave me the first gift of love. I remember." She opened the paper and began. "To my Grandma Grace, you don't wear a cape like superheroes. You don't fly. You don't have a fast car. But you have hands that heal, arms that protect, and eyes that teach me to look at the world without fear. You didn't give me expensive toys or designer clothes, but you gave me the most important thing, your time, your story, and your truth. You made a dress with love, and they threw it away as if it were trash. But you didn't give up. You washed it, you sewed it, you made it new, like you do with me every time I break. That's why, Grandma, no matter what happens, I'm going to stay with you. Because what you gave me wasn't charity, it was love. And that blue dress is my heart." When she finished, the entire classroom fell silent. Some children applauded without fully understanding. Others wiped their tears. The teacher had her hand on her chest. And Grace. Grace was no longer crying from pain. She was crying for having been seen, recognized, loved. But while the classroom celebrated that intimate moment in the main house, Sarah picked up the phone with trembling hands. Is it done yet? Yes. The note was left. She saw it, but she didn't want to get scared. Then escalate it. Are you sure? I'm not going to lose my daughter because of a crazy old witch. Do what you have to do. Make it look like an accident if possible. Just do it now. And she hung up. That afternoon, when Lucy returned home, she found a small envelope on the doorframe of her grandmother's little room. It had no name, only one word written in red marker: caution. She took it, opened it, and inside there was a photo. A photo of Grace sitting selling candy at the traffic light. Below, in a crude hand, it read, "The streets are dangerous for old women." Lucy immediately ran with the sheet in her hand. She showed it to her grandmother, who read it in silence. Her lips tightened. Her eyes showed not fear, but exhaustion. This is out of control now. What do we do? Grace went to the trunk, took out the copy of the original letter, the paper signed by the social worker, and the drawing Lucy had made weeks ago of the blue dress. She put everything in a plastic bag and handed it to the girl. Take this to the teacher. Tell her not to stop. Tell her that now there's no turning back. That night, Sarah went down to the patio. She had messy hair, badly painted nails, and her cell phone in her back pocket. She looked toward Grace's little house. There was no light. She walked straight to the door and knocked hard. Open up! Lucy, who was on the sofa reading, peeked out. My grandma already went to bed. I don't care. Tell her to come out, to face me like a woman. She can't. She's tired. She worked all day. And why are you defending her so much? Because you only know how to yell. She knows how to love. Sarah approached with violent steps, but before she could touch the girl, a voice was heard from the shadow. That's enough, Sarah. It was Mrs. Carmen, who had approached the patio from her house with a flashlight on. Leave that girl alone. You've hurt her enough. And behind Carmen, other women appeared. Mrs. Clara, Mrs. Allie, Lupe, the tamale lady, all in silence. Sarah realized that she was not alone with her rage. The neighborhood was awake, and now it had a memory. In the darkness of her room, Grace heard everything. She didn't go out. She didn't yell. She just lay down next to the open window. And for the first time in many years, she allowed herself to close her eyes, knowing that she was not alone. But while the night enveloped the neighborhood in its stillness, someone else was returning to the neighborhood. A face from the past. A man Grace hadn't seen since Robert's burial. And that man came with truths that even she was not ready to face. The news spread from house to house like a hot wind. Sarah had been seen arguing with Grace right on the sidewalk, her face contorted, her eyes bloodshot, and her screams echoing to the corner. No one knew exactly what had happened inside the house, but the rumors were enough to ignite the entire neighborhood. Some said the police were about to arrive, others that Lucy had cried until she was voiceless. But the truth, no one had told yet. Only those who lived it closely knew it. The night before, Grace had felt a strange pain in her back, like a warning of what was to come. She went to bed early but couldn't fall asleep. She heard noises upstairs, footsteps going back and forth, as if someone was dragging furniture. She knew it was Sarah, and she knew something was coming. Lucy, as always, came down to sleep with her. But that night, there were no stories, there were no drawings, only silence. a heavy silence. The next morning, Sarah came down to the patio with an expression that hadn't been seen on her since Robert's funeral. She had her lips painted dark red, her hair neatly combed, and a folder in her hand. She knocked hard on the door of the little house. "Grace, open up!" The grandmother was already awake. She came out without rushing, without fear. "What do you want?" "Pack your things. You are leaving my property today." Lucy, who heard from inside, ran out. "Mum, you can't do that." "Of course I can," Sarah replied without even looking at her. "This house is mine. She was only here because I allowed it. But not anymore. Not after everything they invented. Not after handing over letters to strangers. Not after poisoning my daughter." "That's not true," Lucy shouted. "She didn't invent anything. She just told what you did to me." Sarah trembled with rage. "Shut up!" The girl took a step back, tears in her eyes. But it was Grace who hugged her. "Don't worry, my child. I'm not going to stay where I'm not wanted." "No, Grandma, don't go." "I have to go, my love," she said, bending down to her height. "But you won't lose me, and I won't lose you, because there is something no one can take away from us. And that is this." She put her hand to her heart. Half an hour later, Grace had packed her simplest clothes, a photo of Robert, the original letter, the blue dress carefully folded, and the notebook where Lucy had written her first poem into a small suitcase. Sarah watched her from the entrance of the house with her arms crossed. "If you cross the street, you won't see Lucy again. I'm warning you." Grace stopped. She looked at her, and with a calmness that burned hotter than any word, she replied, "She will find me even if you hide me, because you can close doors, but you can't break the bond we have." She crossed the sidewalk with slow steps. She didn't turn back. She didn't cry. She didn't curse. Lucy ran after her. "Wait for me. I'm leaving too." Sarah stopped her forcefully by the arm. "You're staying here." "I don't want to stay with you." "Well, you don't have a choice." The girl struggled. She cried. She screamed. But Grace was already on the other side of the street, received with open arms by Mrs. Alley, who had already prepared a small room for her in the back of her house. "No one will touch you here," Alley told her. "Here you are family." That night, at Allie's house, Grace took the blue dress out of her suitcase. She unfolded it. She placed it on the bed as if it were a flag. And on top of it, she put Robert's letter, together, as witnesses, as proof. Lucy managed to escape through the window. She crossed the alley, went through the back door, and hugged her grandmother without saying a word. They would sleep together that night, as always, as before. But Sarah, alone in her room, couldn't sleep. She looked at the empty folder, the rage consuming her inside. She hadn't managed to silence them. She hadn't managed to break them. And now she was afraid. Because she knew that the system, the one she never thought would reach the neighborhood, was already on their side. And she no longer had control. The next morning, a letter arrived under the main door of Sarah's house. It was an official summons, a hearing, near future date. Subject: custody of the minor Lucy Ortiz Ramirez. And at the bottom, a handwritten note said, "Sometimes you don't need to shout. You just have to resist long enough for the truth to speak for itself." It was Grace's handwriting, no signature, but Sarah recognized it immediately. And reading it, for the first time in her life, she had to sit down, because she felt that she was losing. And what she was going to lose was not just custody. It was power. It was the disguise. It was the silence that had served her so well. And when that letter became public at the hearing, Everyone would know what she truly did, Mrs. Grace crossed the street with her head held high and a worn suitcase in her hand. She didn't bring many things. A couple of folded blouses, a scarf, Robert's letter, Lucy's drawing, and of course the blue dress, carefully wrapped in a clear plastic bag. Mrs. Alley was already waiting for her in front of her half-open gate, with a firm gaze and her arms ready to receive her. "Here is your space," she said, as she opened the back door of her house and led her to a small room with a simple bed, a wooden table, and a shelf with dried flowers. "It's not luxurious, but it's yours." Grace left the suitcase aside, stroked the back of the bed, and sighed deeply. "It's more than I need, Allie. Thank you for not asking me anything." True friends don't ask. They act. Lucy arrived a little later, with small steps and her backpack half closed. She came from school with her uniform wrinkled and her heart tight. She ran to hug her grandmother as if she had been absent for years. "Do you feel good here?" "Yes, my child. Better than anywhere I'm not wanted. And can I stay with you now?" Grace looked at her tenderly. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to promise her that nothing would separate them now. But I couldn't lie to her. Not yet. Things have to be resolved first. Lucy looked down. "And what if my mum gets angrier?" "She can't do any more harm. We are no longer alone." During the following days, Grace's room was filled with details. Mrs. Alley lent her some floral curtains. A neighbour donated a mirror, and a lady from the church brought her a knitted blanket. Without intending it, a network of protection had formed around her. The neighbourhood had not only seen her resist, it had also adopted her. But not everything was calm. Every night, Lucy came down the alley, evading her mother's vigilance, and went through the little back door. She stayed for 1 or 2 hours, sometimes more, reading with her grandmother, eating bread, drawing. And although they knew it was dangerous, both needed that moment to keep from fading. One night, while Lucy was doing her homework, Grace felt a sharp pain in her chest. It wasn't strong, but it was different. She got up slowly, drank water, and didn't say anything. She didn't want to worry her. Across the street, Sarah paced back and forth in her living room. She had received the notification of the court hearing for Lucy's custody. It had a date. It had a time. And it had a new enemy, the neighbourhood. She tried to talk to some neighbours, but they all closed the door on her with polite phrases and hard looks. She no longer had support, only silence. But what tormented her most was not the loss of control. It was what Lucy had written, what she had read, what she had said in front of everyone. She couldn't stand it. That girl, her daughter, had challenged her with the only weapon she didn't know how to fight, the truth. One morning, while Lucy was having breakfast at Mrs. Allie's house with her grandmother, there was a knock on the door. It was Mrs. Nancy. "Can I come in?" Grace let her in immediately. Lucy hugged her. "We have news," the teacher said. "Good, but important. The protective custody measure has been authorized. Legally, Lucy can stay with you during the process, but a sentence has not yet been passed. So you must be very careful." Grace squeezed her granddaughter's hand. "Don't worry. I just want her to be safe." And she is. But the hardest part is yet to come. Sarah asked to testify. She is going to use everything she can to make you look bad. Grace remained silent for a few seconds. Then she got up, went to the wardrobe, and took out a small box. Inside, the blue dress, folded, with the white flower still sewn on the chest. "I don't need to invent anything. Everything is here." "The dress?" "Yes, because everything started with it. This dress is proof of what she tried to destroy, and what this girl decided to rescue. That, teacher, no witness can erase." That same afternoon, Lucy returned to her mother's house to pick up some notebooks. Sarah was waiting for her in the living room. "So now you live with your grandma?" "Yes, I feel better there." "And you don't care what people say?" "I do care. That's why I left." Sarah approached, looked her in the eyes. She no longer yelled, but her gaze burned. "Do you plan to stay with that woman forever?" Lucy didn't answer, but before leaving, she turned and said something Sarah didn't expect. "If you had loved her the way I love her, no one would be fighting over me today." And she left. Sarah was left alone, again, without allies, without tools, just with a past she could no longer hide, and a hearing looming. That night, Grace took a new sheet of paper from the trunk. She sat at the table and wrote a few lines. It wasn't a letter or a diary. It was a declaration, a kind of emotional testament. "Lucy is not just my granddaughter. She is my reparation. She is the voice I didn't have, the hug no one gave me, the dream I didn't dare to dream. If a judge needs to know why I want to take care of her, let him read this. I am not perfect, but I never failed her, and I never will." She folded it. She put it away with the dress, and she went to bed. But she couldn't sleep, because at the hearing, they wouldn't just talk about the past. They would put on the table what Sarah had done to Robert, and that truth already had a name, a date, and proof. The custody hearing for Lucy was scheduled for a Monday morning in the small family court located downtown Philadelphia, the same place where, years ago, Sarah and Robert signed their daughter's birth certificate, smiling faintly, without imagining that everything would end in a cold, slow, and silent war. But this time, the protagonists were not them. It was a girl, and a grandma who no longer wanted to keep quiet. That Monday, Mrs. Grace woke up earlier than usual. She washed her face with cold water, carefully combed her hair, smoothed her blouse with the charcoal iron, and took Lucy's blue dress out of the trunk, now clean and perfectly folded, with the white flower still sewn on the chest. She didn't carry it as clothing, but as a symbol, as proof, as a shield. "Are you ready, Grandma?" Lucy asked, already dressed in her school uniform, her hair braided, and with a firmness in her eyes that would surprise any adult. "More than ever," Grace replied, taking her hand gently. Allie accompanied them to the corner, where a cab sent by the Family and Child Protection Division was waiting for them. In the back seat, Mrs. Nancy and the social worker Hortense were already seated, with folders, documents, and determined faces. "Today we are not here to fight," the teacher said, adjusting her glasses. "We are here to tell the truth." Sarah arrived at the courthouse 5 minutes before the hearing. She wore a black jacket, impeccable makeup, and a marble expression. Beside her was a young lawyer, newly hired with what was left of her savings. He wasn't a family law specialist, but he was all she had on hand. And above all, he was discreet. When she saw Grace enter with Lucy on her arm, she couldn't help but grimace. "They came with the whole show," she whispered to the lawyer. "Manipulative old woman." "I recommend you not to speak out loud," the lawyer told her without looking at her. "Everything here can be used against you." The judge in charge of the case was an older woman, with a calm voice and a firm demeanor. She read the file in silence for several minutes. Then she looked up. "We will hear the parties." Grace was the first to speak. She didn't need to read anything. Her voice trembled at first, but soon regained its firmness. She recounted how her life had been since her son's death, how Sarah closed the doors on her, how the girl began to visit her in secret, how the blue dress was thrown into the trash as if it were worthless, and how Lucy rescued it, cleaned it, and kept it as if it were a piece of her own heart. I don't want to take anyone's place as a mother, Judge. I just want this girl to grow up without fear. I'm not perfect, but I have never punished her for loving. When she finished, the room fell silent. Lucy was next. She approached the stand without being called. She had the blue dress in her hands. She held it out in front, like someone presenting an offering. My mum would yell at me when I went down to my grandma's. She told me she was worthless, that she was a burden. But my grandma taught me that love doesn't yell, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't threaten. Do you want to live with your grandmother? The judge asked, without mincing words. Yes, Lucy replied, without blinking. Because with her, I'm not afraid. Sarah suddenly stood up. This is all theatre. That woman has been manipulating her for years. She's brainwashing her. Even the teacher has interfered. Mrs. Sarah, the judge interrupted, without raising her voice. If you yell in this courtroom again, I will have you removed. Sarah backed down, clenching her fists. This is all my dead husband's fault. He wanted to leave. He left. And now they want to blame me. Are you aware of the content of the letter your husband wrote before he passed away? The lawyer tried to intervene, but Sarah spoke first. Of course I am. But that letter doesn't prove anything. He was sick, distraught. The judge sighed. She closed the folder in front of her. I have heard enough. The decision was not given that same day. As in any legal process, they had to analyze every piece of evidence, every statement, every document. But what happened in that room was already irreversible. Sarah had shown what she worked so hard to hide, and Lucy had earned the respect of everyone present. That night, at Mrs. Alley's house, Grace made coffee and sweet rolls to share with Lucy, Mrs. Nancy, and Hortense. They were sitting at the wooden table, surrounded by a calm they hadn't known in a long time. Whatever the result, Nancy said, you already won, Grace. You won by speaking up. And you too, Lucy, Hortense added, because not all girls dare to defend what they love. Lucy just smiled, and she took out a sheet from her notebook that she had saved for that moment. She unfolded it and placed it on the table. It was another drawing, the blue dress. But this time it was not alone, was, around it, roots came out of the hem and spread across the entire sheet, as if it were a tree growing from the heart of a seam. It's because the love that is planted is not thrown away, the girl said. It stays forever. Everyone fell silent. No one said more. It wasn't necessary. But across the neighborhood, in the house that now seemed emptier than ever, Sarah sat in front of the mirror with a lost gaze. She had lost her daughter. But what she didn't know yet was that she was about to lose something more. Because the next day, Grace would not wake up as usual. And what would happen in those hours would forever mark the entire neighborhood. The dawn arrived with a distinct stillness in the backyard of Mrs. Alley's house. There was no wind. The birds were not singing. The sun barely broke the mist with a pale light that filtered through the crack in the window of the little room where Mrs. Grace slept. But she didn't get up. Lucy had spent the night with her grandmother, as so many times before. But that morning, she woke up alone. At first, she was not alarmed. She thought Grace was already making coffee or warming tortillas. But when she went out into the hallway, she saw her sitting in the chair next to the table, with her eyes closed and her head tilted to one side. "Grandma?" She didn't answer. Lucy approached slowly, took her hand, and felt it cold. Not frozen, but different, like when the body doesn't quite wake up. "Grandma?" Grace's eyes barely opened. She tried to move, but her body didn't respond. She mumbled something Lucy didn't understand. The girl screamed. "Mrs. Alley, help! Something is wrong with her." The neighbour came running. She saw Grace, paled, and immediately dialed the emergency number. "Don't worry, child. The ambulance is coming. Don't leave her alone. Speak to her gently." Lucy sat next to her, stroking her face. "I'm here, Grandma. Don't go. Don't leave me yet." Grace only managed to move her fingers, which weakly clung to the girl's blouse. That was enough for Lucy not to break down. Minutes later, the ambulance arrived with its siren low. The paramedics entered and found Grace still conscious, but without strength, very low blood pressure, paleness, weak pulse. They decided to transport her immediately. "Are you the granddaughter?" Lucy nodded. "Is there another relative?" "Only my mum, but I don't want her to know yet." The paramedic hesitated, but saw the fear in the girl's eyes. "Do you want to come with her?" "Yes." Mrs. Alley signed as the temporary guardian and accompanied the girl to the general hospital. Throughout the journey, Lucy didn't let go of her grandmother's hand. In the emergency room, the doctors stabilized Grace. The diagnosis was severe dehydration, with a condition of chronic fatigue and low blood pressure, possibly due to prolonged stress. She had to be admitted. The doctor recommended absolute rest and a cardiac review. "Your grandmother needs calm," the doctor said. "Her heart can't take much more. Has she been very stressed lately?" Lucy looked down. "Yes, doctor. Too much." In Sarah's house, the news arrived not from her daughter, but from a neighbour who had seen the ambulance. "Did you hear? They took your mother-in-law to the hospital. They say she's serious." Sarah didn't respond. She just nodded and closed the door hard. She didn't know what to do with that information. Part of her wanted to go, but another part couldn't stand the idea of showing up and being rejected in front of everyone. Hours passed, evening fell, and Sarah didn't go. At the hospital, Lucy didn't leave the bedside. She held her hand, told her what she had dreamed the night before, talked about the science presentation at school, about how Mrs. Alley had taught her to make rice, anything to keep her awake. Sometimes Grace responded with slight gestures, other times just with a tear that silently rolled down. At one point, Lucy took the blue dress out of her backpack. She placed it on the gurney over her grandmother's legs. "Here it is, see? I haven't let go of it. I promised you I would take care of it. And you promised me you would be here to watch me grow up." Grace opened her eyes and murmured barely audibly, "Yes, my child." Lucy smiled at her, and for a second, it seemed like everything would be okay again. But that same night, while sleeping on the hallway bench, an orderly gently woke her up. "Your grandmother is stable, but she wants to see you. She says she needs to tell you something in case she forgets tomorrow." Lucy immediately got up. She entered the room. Grace was weak, but lucid. "Come, sit down," she said in a low voice. "I have to give you something." She took a folded sheet from under the pillow, written in shaky handwriting. "It's my will. It's not much, but I'm leaving what I have, including that little room and some things stored with Mrs. Carmen. But more than that, I'm leaving you something that is not on paper." "What is it, Grandma?" "My story, my voice, my example. No one can take that away from you." Lucy hugged her, crying. She was afraid to let go, but she knew she couldn't avoid the inevitable. "You are going to grow up strong, my child, not like me, who kept quiet for years. You already know how to speak, and that will save you." The girl nodded silently, and before she fell asleep again, Grace managed to tell her, "If something happens to me, don't hold on to resentment. But don't forget what you lived either, because someday someone else is going to need to hear it. Meanwhile, in the big house, Sarah was making coffee. She looked out the window toward the backyard, and for a second, only one, seemed to hesitate. She took her purse. But she didn't leave. She sat down. She turned on the television. She turned up the volume. And she pretended not to hear the silence, because if she showed up at that hospital, she would have to look Lucy in the eyes. And she wasn't ready. And she never would be. And just as the clock struck midnight, Grace's heart monitor emitted a longer beep than normal. The orderlies ran in. Lucy only managed to shout one word. Grandma. And then everything went white. Lucy barely remembered how she had reached the hospital hallway. Everything happened so fast. The beep of the monitor, the orderlies rushing in, the nurse who gently took her by the shoulders and led her outside while the doors closed, the metallic noise of the instruments, the agitated voices, the wait. It was Mrs. Alley who arrived minutes later, with her heart in her throat and her scarf askew. What happened? She got worse, the girl replied without tears. She didn't want to fall asleep, but her body couldn't take it anymore. The woman hugged her. Neither said more. They just sat, together, waiting. 37 minutes later, a nurse came out. Mrs. Grace is stable. We managed to stabilize her. But she needs absolute rest. She cannot talk much. She cannot move. And if she has anything pending, now is the time. Lucy entered without letting go of Allie's hand. The room was cold, but the grandmother was awake, paler than ever, with tubes in her arms and a thin face, but alive. When she saw her granddaughter enter, Grace smiled with a slight gesture. She extended her hand. The girl ran to take it. I thought you weren't going to open your eyes again, Grandma. I wasn't going to leave without saying goodbye. Don't say that. Grace looked at her with a mixture of sweetness and firmness, that look she used when she needed Lucy to understand something that is only said once. Listen to me carefully, my child, because I don't know if I'll be able to say it tomorrow. The girl nodded, her soul hanging in the balance. I want you to know something I kept for a long time, not out of cowardice, but out of love. Lucy squeezed her hand. Is it about my dad? Yes. Grace looked at the ceiling for a moment. Your dad didn't die by accident. You already know that. But it wasn't just because of fear either. It was because of guilt. He confessed things to me, things that hurt me more than if he had turned his back on me. What things? Your dad knew your mother was pregnant before they got married. He didn't want to get married. But they pressured him. He felt trapped. Not because of you, because of the lie. Lucy listened in silence. And afterward, when you were born, he thought things would change. But they didn't change. Your mum became colder, more controlling. He started going out at night. Sometimes he didn't sleep at home. Once he told me he had wanted to run away, but he didn't because he was afraid of losing you. And why are you telling me this now? Because I don't want you to grow up with the idea that everything was the fault of one person. Your mum also suffered. She didn't know how to love. She didn't know how to heal. And sometimes, those who don't know how to heal end up hurting everyone. Lucy lowered her head. She thought about everything she had lived through, the shouting, the looks, the dress in the trash. And yet, a part of her still loved her. Do you think I should forgive her? Grace looked at her with moist eyes. I think you should forgive yourself first for being so afraid of her, and then decide if you want to carry that or let it go. But don't force yourself, and don't rush. Lucy lay down next to her on the gurney, careful not to touch the cables. She closed her eyes. Don't leave me alone, Grandma. Never. Even if I'm not here one day, I'll be wherever you are, in your voice, in your laughter, in what you write. The next day, the judge in the case received an urgent notification from the hospital. The grandmother requested to testify early for medical reasons. It had to be done in the hospital, under supervision, in the presence of the prosecutor's office. Everything was coordinated in a few hours. Mrs. Nancy, Hortense, and an assistant judge arrived that same afternoon. Sarah also arrived, unannounced. She entered the hospital with a firm step, dressed in white. She wanted to see with her own eyes if the old woman was really as bad as everyone said. When she entered the room, she saw her, pale, with a sunken face, but with open and clear eyes. "Did you come to finish what you started?" Grace asked in a faint voice. Sarah didn't answer. She just crossed her arms. "If you're going to lie again, do it well. Because this time, they won't believe you." "I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to tell my truth. And Robert's." Sarah tensed. "What do you know about my husband?" "More than you dared to listen to. He told me everything before he died. He wrote it to me, and I kept it. But now I don't need it anymore, because the most important thing is already here." She pointed to Lucy. "She is my legacy, not what he left, what I built with what you broke." "Stop it!" Sarah shouted. "Stop blaming me for everything." The judge looked at her coldly. "Mrs. Sarah, if you don't keep quiet, you will have to leave." Sarah clenched her teeth, but stayed. Grace took a breath, the little her lungs allowed. "I don't want revenge. I just want justice, not for me, for her." Lucy approached. She hugged her grandmother, and in front of everyone, in a clear voice, she said, "My grandma taught me that you don't become an adult when you have a birthday, but when you learn to defend who you love." The judge wrote something. Hortense nodded in silence, and Sarah turned her face away, because at that moment she knew that there were no more masks left, or excuses. But she didn't know yet that someone else, someone she didn't expect, was about to speak at the final hearing. And when he did, everything she hid would come to light. The afternoon was falling slowly over the General Hospital in Philadelphia. From room 212, the sun filtered a warm light that covered the foot of the bed where Mrs. Grace was resting. She had slept almost all day, but her breathing was stable. On her face, color was returning little by little, and although her body was tired, her mind was still awake. Lucy sat in front of the window, her knees pulled up to the armchair, watching the sunset with the blue dress in her hands. She had carried it with her every day, like an amulet, like a flag. The dress was no longer just clothing. It was a symbol of everything they had resisted together, of what they had overcome, and of what still remained to be faced. That same morning, while Grace slept, Hortense had returned to the hospital with news. "The definitive hearing has been scheduled." Lucy looked at her with wide eyes. "Does that mean?" "That the judge is going to pass sentence, full custody. One decision? And can she decide that I go back to my mum?" "Yes," Hortense replied sincerely. "But she can also give you what you have asked for." Lucy took a deep breath. She didn't say anything. But inside, something told her that that moment would be the one that would define her story forever. Later, when Grace woke up, she asked to speak to Lucy alone. The girl approached with the blue dress in her hands and sat on the edge of the bed. "My child," Grace said in a weak voice, "I need you to do me a favor, one you won't like. Tell me. I want you to not cry much if I don't get up from this bed. Just a little, yes, But don't stop yourself. Don't stop studying. Don't stop writing. And don't let anyone silence your voice. Lucy started to cry softly, but she nodded. And do you promise me that you won't leave yet? As long as I can breathe, I'll be here. And what if the judge says I have to go back to her? Grace stroked her face. Then you decide how to resist. You already know how to do it. You don't have to yell. You just have to say what you feel. The girl hugged her grandmother tightly, trembling. The next day, Grace asked Mrs. Alley to bring her trunk to the hospital. Inside, she kept more than just memories, documents, papers, photographs. But above all, a will. She wrote it by hand, in blue ink, on 2 folded sheets. It was signed and dated. She gave it to Hortense with clear instructions. This is not to leave her property. It is to leave her who I am, my story, so that it is not lost. It will be respected, Ma'am. You have my word. And what if Sarah contests it? She can't anymore. Lucy has spoken, and there is enough to defend her. Grace nodded and closed her eyes peacefully. In the other house, Sarah watched the coming and going of the street from the second-floor window. No one spoke to her. No one greeted her. She had become a lonely, almost invisible figure. Her attempts to talk to the neighbours had failed. Mrs. Carmen didn't look at her. Mrs. Alley closed the gate on her without saying a word. The baker pretended not to hear her when she asked for credit. And Lucy no longer looked at her with fear, only with distance. Sarah, for the first time, felt the weight of solitude. Not the one you experience when you are alone, but the one that comes when others decide you are not going to hurt anyone else anymore. At the hospital, when Lucy went to say goodbye to Grace to go home with Allie, her grandmother stopped her for an instant. Before you go, I have to tell you something that is not in the letter. What is it? The dress. That blue dress. I didn't make it just to see you look pretty. I made it to give you a place, so that when they saw you, they would know you were important to someone, that you were loved. Lucy hugged it. And I'm going to make you a dress too, one of words, with everything I learned from you. Grace laughed softly. That will be the prettiest of all. The next day, the entire neighborhood woke up uneasy. Everyone knew that the sentence was just hours away. The streets were quieter. The murmur was felt in the air. And Sarah, dressed in a white blouse and dark pants. She combed her hair as if she were going to church, and she went down to the dining room with the document folder in her hand. But upon opening it, she didn't find what she was looking for. Inside, there was only one envelope, with Robert's handwriting. She hadn't seen it in years. She had hidden it, forgotten it, and now it was in front of her again. She opened it, she read it, and she cried, because for the first time she read the last line she had never dared to read. If I can't protect Lucy, at least let Mum try, because I no longer have the strength to fight against the pain. Sarah dropped the letter, and she understood that she had already lost. But she didn't know that she still had one decision left, and that what she did in the courtroom could be her last act of redemption. It was Sunday night. Not a single star shone in the Philadelphia sky. The air was warm, but heavy. The neighborhood streets looked quieter than normal, as if the whole city knew that something was about to end. In the hospital, Mrs. Grace's room smelled of fresh flowers. Mrs. Alley had brought a small bouquet of daisies and placed them next to the window. Lucy slept sitting in the chair, her head resting on the edge of the bed. The blue dress was carefully folded in her backpack, just as she had promised. It was almost 2 o'clock in the morning when Grace opened her eyes with difficulty. She looked around slowly and recognized every detail: the dim light, the silence, her granddaughter asleep with a serene face. And she understood, deep in her body, that the moment had arrived. "Lucy," she whispered in a barely audible voice. The girl immediately sat up. "Grandma? Come, sit next to me." Lucy took her hand. "I'm here. Do you remember what I promised you?" "Everything." Grace smiled weakly. "Then listen. I want to ask you one last thing. It's not an order. It's a gift. Tell me, when you have your birthday, put on the blue dress. Even if it's tight, even if it squeezes a little. Don't change it. Don't wash it. Don't iron it. Just put it on as it is." Lucy fell silent. She nodded. "And why?" "Because when you put it on, you will feel my hands, my stitches, my days at the traffic light, my tiredness, my pride, my faith. Everything is there, sewn into every thread." The girl couldn't hold back her tears. She rested her forehead on her grandmother's arm and cried softly. "I promise I will. And when you do, smile. Don't cry for me. Smile as if you were seeing me." "But I don't want to lose you, Grandma." "You won't lose me, my love. You will keep me, like that dress, like that secret you guarded when no one else did. You saved me. You made me eternal." Lucy raised her face. She stroked her wrinkled cheeks. "Does it hurt?" "No, it doesn't hurt any more, because I have no more unfinished business. I already said what I had to say. I already wrote what I had to write. I already saw you grow up. I already saw you fight. And that is all a woman like me can ask of life." The monitor continued to mark a slow rhythm. The nurse passed by to check, but did not interrupt. She knew that conversation was not medical. It was sacred. Grace took a breath with difficulty. "One last thing. What is it? When they ask you about me, don't say that I was a good grandmother. Say that I was a complete woman. That my bones ached, but never my conscience. That I got tired, but never gave up. That I sold candy to buy dignity, to sow love, to give you something more than bread, to leave you a story." Lucy lay down next to her. "You gave me everything." Grace closed her eyes, without letting go of her hand. "Sleep, my child. Tomorrow will be a great day." And at that moment, as if the night had been waiting for exactly that phrase, the monitor marked a slight decline. A sigh. A calm. Lucy didn't feel afraid. She just squeezed her grandmother's fingers tighter, and she stayed like that, in silence. Because there was nothing more to say. Because everything had already been said. At 6 o'clock in the morning, Mrs. Alley arrived with hot coffee and sweet rolls. Upon entering, the nurse stopped her with a firm look. "She has rested now." The woman put her hands to her chest. She cried softly, the way you only cry for someone who became family without sharing blood. Lucy was still next to the bed, holding her grandmother's hand. The judge, the social worker, and Mrs. Nancy arrived shortly after. They found out through a discreet call from the hospital. They went up in silence. When they saw Lucy with the blue dress in her hands, they understood everything. "Are you going to put it on?" the teacher asked, with a lump in her throat. Lucy nodded. "Today is my birthday." Hours later, at the final custody hearing, the judge asked all parties to present themselves. Sarah arrived with a pale face, no makeup, no defences. Lucy entered alone, wearing the blue dress. The dress was a little tight on the shoulders. The lace was somewhat worn. The white flower was no longer so white, but it shone brighter than ever. The judge looked at her. "Are you sure that's what you want to wear today?" "Yes, Your Honor. My grandma asked me to wear it on my birthday." "And why?" "Because it's made with everything she was, with everything she left me, and because I want her to see me from wherever she is, even though she's not here." No one said another word. Sarah lowered her head, and then the judge raised the document. "By virtue of the facts, the evidence, the testimonies, and the express will of the minor, full custody is granted to Mrs. Grace Ramirez in her capacity as maternal grandmother, post-mortem, and legal guardianship and protection are granted to the minor under the supervision of Mrs. Ali Perez, a family friend, until she reaches adulthood." Lucy closed her eyes. She didn't cry. She just smiled. Because her grandmother had kept her promise. Because the dress was not just fabric. It was testimony. It was truth. And there was still one last letter to open, one that Grace had written by hand, and that Lucy would receive the day she needed it most. The elementary school playground was decorated with balloons and streamers. It was the celebration day for the month's birthdays, and Lucy, with barely 7 years newly completed, walked among the benches decorated with paper flowers with a serenity that was out of place with the joy of the other children. She wore the blue dress, the same one, the one Mrs. Grace sewed by hand with the money she earned selling candy at the traffic light, the one that was once thrown in the trash, the one that was washed, rescued, defended, kept as a treasure, and that now, although it was tight on the shoulders and the lace was already noticeably worn, seemed to shine brighter than ever. Mrs. Nancy greeted her with a discreet hug. "Are you sure you want to say something?" Lucy nodded. She took a letter out of her backpack, carefully folded, written in blue ink on paper that smelled like dried basil. The handwriting was shaky, firm, familiar. "My grandma asked me to read it today," she said, without fear. The teacher nodded. She asked the group for silence. Lucy went up to the small makeshift platform in the patio. She took a deep breath, and she began to read. "Dear Lucy, if you are reading this, it's because I am no longer with you physically. But don't be afraid. Don't feel alone. I am here, in your voice, in your courage, in every step you take. You taught me that love is not saved, it is given, and that girls can be stronger than the wind when they defend what they love. Thank you for saving my dress. Thank you for rescuing me when everyone forgot me. Thank you for giving me a new life in your eyes. Don't let anyone turn off your light. Never keep quiet. And when you feel like you miss me, just put on this dress. And listen to your heart. I will be there. Always yours. Your grandma, Grace. Asterisk." Lucy folded the paper gently. She didn't cry. She just looked at the sky. The children applauded. They didn't fully understand, but they knew that something important had happened. The teacher walked toward her. She hugged her, and she told her in her ear, "She is watching you." At the end of the day, when all the parents came to pick up their children, Lucy walked out alone. She walked through the neighborhood square, crossed the street with calm steps, and stopped in front of the market. An older woman who sold flowers recognized her. "Your grandma is not with you anymore, is she, my child?" Lucy smiled. "Yes, she is. She just doesn't walk anymore. Now she flies with me." The lady was moved. "And where is she going?" Lucy touched her chest, right where the lace of the blue dress brushed her heart. "Here. She's going here." And as she walked away, with the dress billowing in the wind and her gaze fixed forward, Several neighbors watched her from the gates. One asked her, "Where did your grandma go, Lucy?" And she, without stopping, replied with the certainty of someone who has loved deeply, "Here, with me." If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, leave your like, and write the word dress in the comments so I know you made it to the end. And if you want to support this channel to continue sharing stories full of emotion and dignity like Mrs. Grace's, you can leave a super thank you right here. Every gesture counts, because telling stories is also a form of resistance. Thank you for joining me. We'll hear from each other in the next story.